Chapter 1: The Still Point. The rain was a constant companion in Neo-Kyoto's underbelly. It slicked the narrow streets with a perpetual sheen of grime and neon, drumming a relentless, uneven rhythm against the Durapla's window of Lachlan Kenner's cramped apartment. The sound burrowed into his skull, a dull percussion accompanying the sharp, crystalline agony blooming behind his right eye. He squeezed the bridge of his nose, his knuckles white. The Kestrel-class ocular implant was acting up again. Its cheap stabilization buffers were probably degraded, turning the world's edges into a razor-sharp flicker every time he moved his head too fast. A low chime emanated from the terminal squatting on his cluttered desk. Locke opened his eyes, the single room swimming into focus, a mattress on the floor, a stack of nutrient-paced containers, and the faint, ever-present scent of ozone and recycled water. He pushed himself off a creaking chair and shuffled toward the screen. The message was from an anonymous, encrypted source, the only kind of work he got anymore. The text was stark, no pleasantries. Omnicorp Spire, the nightly statue, proof of existence, 5,000 credits. Locke read the message twice. 5,000. Barely enough to cover rent on the shoebox and a new set of stabilizers for his eye. It was a pittance, an insult for any real journalistic work. But he was not a real journalist anymore. Not since the Arasaka biotech exposé had blown up in his face, leaving him disgraced, unemployable, and persona non grata in the gleaming corporate sectors above. Now he was Locke, a truth finder for slum dwellers and conspiracy theorists. He took pictures of cheating spouses and documented code violations for petty lawsuits. Nightly statue, he murmured, the words tasting metallic. He ran a search through the public network. The phrase pinged a dozen hits on fringe forums and whispered data havens. The stories were all the same, fragmented and paranoid. A figure. It appeared every night on the absolute pinnacle of the Omnicorp Tower, the tallest structure in the city, a needle of black steel and light that pierced the perpetual smog. It stood for 1 hour from 2:00 a.m. to 3:00 a.m., then vanished. No one had a clear image. The tower's security was legendary, its exterior supposedly scrubbed by swarms of anti-drone lasers and sensor-blinding static fields. A fool's errand. A ghost story for chrome-addled junkies. He should delete the message. His implant pulsed with pain, a sharp spike that made him grunt. The rent was due. The stabilizers were not a luxury. Without them, the migraines would eventually render him blind. He typed a one-word reply. Accepted. The credits would transfer upon delivery of a verified, high-resolution image. He pushed away from the terminal and went to the large, battered case in the corner of his room. Inside, cushioned in yellowed foam, was his actual eye, a Fujiwara 1200 telephoto lens attached to an old, pre-integration Canon body. It was a relic, a piece of purely analog technology that couldn't be hacked, jammed, or remotely wiped. It captured light on a physical sensor. It was honest. He spent the next hour preparing. He cleaned the lens with a microfiber cloth, checked the power cells for the camera body, and selected a series of light-gathering filters designed to cut through atmospheric haze. He slipped a data chip into the camera's side, a modern concession, but kept the primary storage on a physical, removable memory card. Paranoia was a survival trait in the lower sectors. His gear packed into a nondescript, waterproof satchel, he pulled on a long, dark coat and stepped out into the rain. The alley greeted him with a blast of cold air thick with the smell of sizzling food from a nearby stall and the chemical tang of runoff from the levels above. Neon signs in Japanese, Mandarin, and city-speak bled down concrete walls, their reflections writhing in the puddles underfoot. The roar of the city was a physical pressure, a constant hum of transport tubes, ventilation systems, and a million overlapping conversations. He needed a vantage point. Directly across from the Omnicorp Tower, 2 sectors away, was the skeletal husk of the old Yamadori complex. It was scheduled for demolition for a decade, a 70-story wreck of shattered windows and corroded steel beams. Its upper floors would offer a clear, if distant, line of sight. Getting there was a descent into the city's guts. He navigated crowded walkways slick with rain, past noodle bars where patrons hunched over steaming bowls, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of data slates. He ignored the beggars with their glitching cybernetic limbs and the dealers whispering offers of cheap VR trips and combat drugs. The air grew heavier, the crowds thinner, as he moved toward the condemned zone. The Yamadori complex loomed over him, a dead giant against the polluted sky. The perimeter fence was a joke, a mess of rusted chain link with a dozen man-sized holes. He slipped through one and found himself in a cavernous, debris-strewn lobby. The only light came from the city outside, casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to writhe in the corners of his vision. He found the emergency stairwell. The air was stale, thick with the dust of ages. He began to climb, his footsteps echoing in the oppressive silence. Floor after floor, the city's roar receded, replaced by the sound of his own breathing and the groan of stressed metal. His leg muscles burned. The kestrel implant throbbed in time with his heart. He stopped on what he guessed was the 65th floor. An entire wall had collapsed, opening the level to the elements. Rain drifted in, misting his face. From here, across a chasm of darkness and light, the Omnicorp Tower stood proud and defiant. It was a monument to power, its surface crawling with automated lights, its spire a razor's edge against the bruised purple of the night sky. He checked his chrono. 1:45 a.m. He had 15 minutes. He assembled his gear with practiced efficiency, mounting the camera on a small, steady tripod. He pulled a waterproof tarp over his head and the camera, creating a small, dark space to work. Peering through the viewfinder, he adjusted the focus. The tower's spire leaped into clarity. It was a needle point, an impossible place for a person to stand. There were no platforms, no guardrails, nothing but a final, tapering antenna array. The minutes crawled. The rain fell. The city hummed its electric song. Locke kept his eye pressed to the viewfinder, his finger resting on the shutter button. Then at 2:00 a.m. precisely it happened. It was not a gradual arrival. There was no ship, no transport, no sign of approach. One moment the spire was empty. The next it was not. A figure stood on the very tip. Locke's breath caught in his throat. His implant screamed, a spike of white-hot pain lancing through his optic nerve as he tried to use its zoom function. A wave of nausea washed over him. The air itself seemed to crackle, the view through his kestrel shimmering with a strange, oily static. He squeezed his eyes shut, fighting the agony. "No," he growled through gritted teeth. "Analog stick to analog." He abandoned his implant's vision and pressed his organic eye back to the camera's eyepiece. He adjusted the manual focus ring, his fingers clumsy. The figure was tall, impossibly thin, a silhouette against the garish glow of the city. He fired off a series of shots, the camera's quiet click a small rebellion against the overwhelming silence of the object. He worked for a solid 10 minutes, bracketing exposures, switching filters, trying to capture any detail. The figure did not move. It was utterly still, a shard of night given human form. It stood without any visible support, unaffected by the wind and rain that whipped at that impossible height. His head pounded. Black spots danced in his vision. He needed to stop. He had the shots. He lowered the camera and risked a final glance with his own eyes. The figure was still there, a black void on the spire. As he watched, he noticed its posture. It was not looking down, surveying the city it lorded over. Its head was tilted, its entire form angled slightly upward, aimed at a patch of sky where no stars could penetrate the smog. It was watching, waiting. A flicker on his implant's display, a phantom image overlaid on his vision. For a split second he saw something else, not on the tower but much closer. A shape, all sharp angles and skittering legs, scrambling over the ledge of a building to his right. He blinked and it was gone, just a glitch, a symptom of his failing chrome. He started to disassemble his tripod, his hands shaking slightly. He had the proof. He would get his credits. But as he packed the camera away, a cold certainty settled in his gut. This was more than a job. This was wrong. The stillness of the figure, the way it drank the light, the unnerving sense of purpose in its vigil. It was a question mark punched into the sky. And he, with his camera and his broken eye, was the only one who seemed to be asking what it meant. He pulled the memory card from the camera and slid it into a shielded pocket inside his coat. He would upload a single, watermarked proof to his client. He zoomed in on the camera's small display screen to review his work. The image was terrifyingly clear. The figure was not a man in a suit. Its outlines were too perfect, its joints seamless. It was a thing of absolute blackness, a hole in the shape of a man. As he stared at the captured image, his implant pulsed, not with pain but with a stream of corrupted data, a soft, whispering static that sounded almost like a word, a language he could not comprehend. He ripped the kestrel's power cell from its port behind his ear, and the world snapped back into silent, throbbing focus. He had his proof. He also had a feeling this was the beginning of something much worse than a simple ghost story. Chapter 2: The Warden's Shadow. The noodles were bland, the broth a thin, salty imitation of flavor, but the heat was real. Locke hunched over the bowl at a grimy street-level stall, the steam warming his face. He'd sent a single, heavily watermarked image to his anonymous client an hour ago. The 5,000 credits had appeared in his account moments later, no questions asked. The transaction was clean, efficient, and deeply unsettling. He used a third of the money to pay his landlord, a corpulent man named Wren who ran the entire tenement block. Another portion went to a back-alley cyberdock for a new set of optic stabilizers. The dock, a twitchy woman with mismatched mechanical fingers, had installed them with practiced speed, her only comment a grunt about the substandard Hong Kong grayware of his kestrel implant. The immediate relief from the migraines was worth the price. The world no longer felt like it was trying to split his skull open. Now, with the remaining credits, he was buying information. He finished his noodles and left the stall, pulling his collar up against the persistent drizzle. 2 blocks down, in an alley choked with discarded tech and overflowing dumpsters, was a door marked with a single, faded kanji for silence. He knocked 3 times, paused, then knocked twice more. A heavy magnetic lock clicked open. Inside, the air was cool and dry. The room was a chaotic nest of wires and antique computer hardware, the walls lined with Faraday mesh that blocked all external signals. In the center of the room, facing a bank of flickering CRT monitors, sat a figure in a high-backed chair. The connection is physical or the transaction is void lock. A synthesized voice crackled from a speaker. The voice was a discordant mess of pitches, deliberately scrambled. This was Jinx, the city's most reliable and most paranoid info broker. "I have the chip," Locke said, his own voice sounding loud in the quiet room. He held up a small, insulated data chip. "State the query." The avatar on the central screen, a simple, glitching green question mark, pulsed in time with the synthesized words. "Omnicorp Tower," Locke began, stepping closer. "Security schematics, exterior sensor nets, anti-drone patrols, static field generators, anything you have on Warden Kaido." The question mark froze. For a long moment, the only sound was the hum of the servers. "That is an expensive query," Jinx's voice returned, slower this time. "The warden does not like being queried. The risk profile is high." "I have 2,000 credits," Locke stated flatly. "Insufficient." Locke gritted his teeth. "This is not for a client, this is for me. Personal curiosity is a luxury. Information is a commodity. The price for OmniCorp core security data is 10,000. I don't need core data. I need to know what's on the outside, on the spire. I need to know how something can stand up there for an hour every night without being detected or blown to pieces." There was another long pause. The fans in a nearby server rack word. "The nightly statue," the synthesized voice mused. "That query is more frequent lately. It is becoming a trend." Jinx seemed to be weighing options. "The price is still 10, however. I have a counteroffer, a trade." Locke waited. Trades with Jinx were notoriously dangerous. "You are a photographer," the voice continued. "There is a courier, goes by the name Pilfer. They run the high routes. They have seen something, they are scared. They frequent the noodle bar at the corner of Sector 4 and the Jinza bypass. Get me a clear, identifiable photo of their face, a photo I can use. Do this and I will give you the exterior schematics." It was a setup. Jinx wanted leverage on a courier who likely ran sensitive data for a rival. Getting the picture would make Locke an enemy of someone who lived their life hundreds of meters above the ground. But he needed the information. "Fine," Locke said. You'll have your picture by tomorrow." He turned to leave. "Lock," the voice crackled, stopping him at the door. "A piece of advice free of charge. Warden Kaido is not a corporate bully. He is a true believer. He considers the tower a sacred space. If you are poking around his sanctuary, be prepared for more than a warning." The magnetic lock clicked shut behind him, leaving him once more in the damp, neon-soaked alley. The next day was a wash of gray light and endless rain. Locke spent it productively. He staked out the noodle bar from a second-story window across the street, his analog camera resting on the sill. He waited for hours, watching the flow of humanity pass by. Finally, he spotted them. Pilfer was young, gender ambiguous, clad in light, flexible armor with a grapple launcher holstered on their hip. They moved with a fluid grace, their head on a constant swivel. They never stayed in one place for more than a few minutes, grabbing a bowl of noodles and eating on the move. Getting a clear shot of their face was difficult. They wore a high collar and a low-brimmed cap, but Locke was patient. As Pilfer paused to check a message on their wrist-mounted data slate, they looked up, scanning the surrounding buildings. For a single second, their face was clear. Locke's shutter clicked. He had the shot. He made the trade with Jinx that evening, a silent exchange of data chips in the same dark alley. Back in his apartment, he plugged the new chip into his terminal. The files were extensive. Schematics for overlapping fields of laser grids, motion sensors, thermal detectors, and microwave emitters. Patrol routes for the silent, gliding Skyray drones. And at the center of it all, the static field. According to the data, it was not just a simple jammer. It was a localized energy field that projected a low-level imp, designed to fry the circuits of any unauthorized tech. It also had a strange, secondary function listed in the technical notes: psychotronic resonance. It was designed to induce paranoia and auditory hallucinations in unsanctioned observers. His migraines, the phantom static, it wasn't just his cheap implant. The tower was actively attacking him. But the most critical piece of information was about the spire. According to every schematic, the top 50 meters of the antenna were saturated with a constant, high-energy charge. Lethal. Nothing electronic could function there. Nothing organic could survive. The figure, the watcher, should not exist. A soft chime from his terminal interrupted his thoughts. It was not a message. It was a system alert. Intrusion DATACTD. System scan initiated. Locke's blood ran cold. He slammed his hand on the emergency cutoff, plunging the apartment into darkness. Too late. They knew he had the data. They knew he was looking. He grabbed his satchel, stuffing the camera and his data chips inside. He needed to run. He crept to the door and peered through the security lens. The hallway was empty, but the air felt charged, heavy with anticipation. He opened the door and stepped out, moving quickly and quietly toward the stairwell. He chose to go up. The rooftops were his best chance. As he climbed, he heard a sound from below. A soft, whirring noise accompanied by the precise, synchronized footsteps of multiple people. They were already in the building. He burst onto the roof, the rain hitting him like a physical blow. The cityscape spread out before him, a chaotic vista of light and shadow. He ran, leaping across the gap to the next building, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was exposed, a lone figure against the illuminated sky. A high-pitched whine cut through the air. A red laser dot appeared on the wall just ahead of him. He dove behind a large ventilation unit, the duracrete behind him exploding in a shower of sparks. He peered around the edge. Two figures stood on the rooftop he had just left. They were clad in sleek black armor, their faces obscured by reflective visors. They were not police. They were corporate tactical. Another whine. This time he saw the source. A Skyray drone, its skeletal wings catching the neon glow, banked gracefully in the air, its central lens fixed on his position. He was pinned. Lachlan Kenner, a voice boomed, amplified and devoid of emotion. It came from the drone. Cease your movements. You are in violation of OmniCorp private property protocols. You are ordered to surrender for questioning. Locke's mind raced. Surrendering meant a corporate black site, a memory wipe or worse. He looked around, desperate for an escape route. His eyes fell on a thick bundle of power cables that stretched from his building to another one further down, spanning a wide, dark alley. It was insane. One of the armored figures raised their weapon. Locke made his choice. He took a running start and leaped, grabbing onto the thick, slick cables. His hands screamed in protest as he slid, the friction burning through his gloves. The alley yawned below, a pit of darkness. The drone swooped after him, its red targeting laser dancing across his back. He hit the next rooftop hard, rolling to absorb the impact. He scrambled to his feet and kept running, not daring to check behind him. He plunged into the maze of rooftop structures, water tanks, comms arrays, and forgotten service sheds. He needed to get back down to street level, to lose himself in the anonymity of the crowd. He found a fire escape and clambered down, his movements frantic. He dropped the last 15 feet into a narrow alley, landing in a pile of overflowing trash bags. He lay there for a moment, gasping for air, the stench of refuse filling his nostrils. The whir of the drone was gone. The shouts had faded. He had escaped for now. He pushed himself up, his body aching. As he stepped out of the alley, a long black vehicle with no markings slid to a silent stop at the curb, blocking his path. The door hissed open. Inside sat a man. He was dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his features sharp and severe. His hair was silver at the temples, and his eyes were the color of cold steel. He held a data slate in his lap, but his attention was fixed entirely on Locke. There was no weapon in sight, but the man radiated a palpable aura of absolute authority. "Mr. Kenner," the man said, his voice calm and precise. It was the same voice Locke had heard Jinx describe. "You have been difficult to locate. I am Warden Kaido. I believe you have some corporate property. I would like it back. Please get in the car." The invitation was not a request. It was a command, delivered with the serene confidence of a predator that knows its prey is already caught. Standing behind Locke, stepping out of the shadows, were the two armored figures from the roof. There was nowhere left to run. Chapter 3: Ghosts in the Static. The interior of the vehicle was silent and cold. The windows were opaque, shutting out the chaotic vibrancy of the city, creating a sterile, isolated space. Locke sat opposite Warden Kaido, flanked by the two armored guards who stood like statues by the doors. Every muscle in Locke's body was coiled, ready to fight or flee, but he knew either action was futile. Kaido had not spoken since his invitation. He simply stared at Locke, his gaze analytical, dissecting. It was a look Locke had seen before in corporate liquidators and high-level strategists, the look of a man who sees people not as individuals, but as assets or obstacles. Right now, Locke was an obstacle. The data chip containing the security schematics, Kaido said finally, his voice cutting through the silence. Where is it? I don't know what you're talking about, Locke lied, his own voice sounding thin. Kaido offered a slight, humorless smile. It did not reach his eyes. Mr. Kenner, I have your entire digital footprint from the last 72 hours displayed on this slate. I know about your anonymous client. I know about your visit to the infobroker known as Jinx. I know you photographed a courier named Pilfer. And I know you received a high-value data package less than an hour ago. We can skip the tedious preliminaries. Locke's stomach tightened. Kaido's intelligence was total. He hadn't just been found, he'd been observed, his every move logged and analyzed. The chip is gone, Locke said, trying a different tack. I destroyed it when your goons started shooting at me. Unlikely, Kaido replied smoothly. You are a professional even if your current circumstances are reduced. You understand the value of information. You would not destroy your only piece of leverage. He leaned forward slightly. Let me be clear, I am not here to negotiate. That chip is a minor security breach, easily contained. My primary concern is your motivation. Why is a disgraced journalist suddenly interested in the atmospheric interference and structural integrity of my tower's spire? Locke remained silent, his mind racing. Giving up the Watcher felt like giving up his only card. It was a mystery that Omnicorp, with all its power, seemed to be ignoring or actively concealing. Why? Is it about the nightly statue? Kaido asked, his eyes narrowing. The ghost story. Are you chasing cheap sensationalism for the conspiracy forums? The question was dismissive, but there was an undercurrent of genuine curiosity. Kaido was testing him. I take pictures, Locke said, keeping his answer simple. Someone was paying for a picture of your tower. 5,000 credits, Kaido countered, glancing at his slate. A paltry sum, not enough to risk the attention of Omnicorp security. There is another reason. The vehicle slowed to a stop. The door beside Locke hissed open. They were in a dark, subterranean parking garage, the air tasting of concrete and exhaust fumes. Give me the chip, Mr. Kenner, Kaido said, his voice hardening for the first time. And I will let you walk away from this vehicle. I will scrub your file, erase this entire evening. You will forget your interest in my tower. You will return to your life of petty assignments. This is your only offer. The threat was implicit. Refuse, and he would not be walking away at all. Locke thought of the image on his camera. The impossible figure, a hole in reality, watching the empty sky. He thought of the phantom static whispering in his ear. This was bigger than a corporate security breach. Handing over the chip meant letting them bury it completely. Slowly, he reached into the shielded pocket of his coat. He pulled out the chip Jinx had given him. He held it between his thumb and forefinger. Kaido's eyes were locked on it. One of the guards shifted his weight, ready to move. With a sudden, sharp motion, Locke snapped the chip in half. The tiny sliver of plastic and silicon made a faint cracking sound in the silence of the car. Kaido's expression did not change, but a new coldness settled in his eyes. "A foolish gesture," he said softly, "and a pointless one. We have the source. Jinx will be decommissioned, and you have merely complicated your own situation." Kaido nodded to the guard on Locke's left. The guard grabbed Locke's arm in a grip of crushing strength, pulling him from the vehicle. They were not in a public space. This was a private Omnicorp garage, deep beneath the city. "You are making a grave mistake," Kaido said from the car. "You are pursuing a non-event, a sensor ghost, a recurring atmospheric anomaly. You are chasing nothing and you will find nothing." The guard began to drag Locke toward a featureless metal door. "If it's nothing," Locke called out, his voice hoarse, "then why does it have you so worried?" Kaido did not answer. The car door hissed shut and the vehicle slid away into the darkness, leaving Locke alone with the two guards. They shoved him toward the door, which opened into a small, brightly lit room. It was bare, save for a single chair in the center. A debriefing room. "Empty your pockets, all of it," the first guard commanded. Locke did as he was told, placing his camera, his remaining data chips, and his personal terminal on a steel table. The second guard began to methodically scan the items. His kestrel implant suddenly flared, not with pain, but with a visual distortion. For a split second, the guard examining his camera seemed to stretch, his limbs elongating, his face melting into a mask of smooth, featureless skin. The unthing from the rooftop. A hallucination. Locke blinked hard and the image was gone. The guard was just a man in a suit of armor, the psychotronic resonance from the tower. It was lingering, infecting his chrome. The guard picked up his camera. "Analog," he grunted with disdain. He removed the memory card. "Primary storage located." He handed it to the first guard. "Wipe it," the first guard ordered. The second guard inserted the card into a device on the table. A low hum filled the room. After a moment, he ejected the card and tossed it back on the table. Scrubbed, zeroed out. Locke's heart sank. His proof, all his images of the Watcher were gone. The first guard turned to him. "The warden was generous. You are free to go. A word of warning. Do not look up anymore. The sky is not your concern." They pushed him out a different door, back into a service tunnel that smelled of damp concrete. He was disoriented, his gear returned to him, but his evidence destroyed. They had let him go. Why? It didn't make sense. It was too easy. He stumbled through the tunnels, eventually finding his way back to the lower-level streets. He felt violated, scrubbed clean. They had taken his photos, but they hadn't taken his memory. Or had they? He tried to picture the Watcher, but the image felt distant, dreamlike. Was that his own mind, or had they done something to him in that room? He made his way back to his apartment, his body aching. The place felt different, tainted by the intrusion. He sat at his terminal, his mind a whirlwind of confusion and fear. They called the Watcher a non-event, a censor ghost. But their reaction was anything but casual. They had deployed a tactical team, interrogated him, and systematically destroyed his data. They were hiding something. He needed to find another way. He needed someone who knew more, someone who wasn't afraid of Omnicorp. His mind went back to Kaido's words. I know about your anonymous client, the client who had started this. They had known about the Watcher. They wanted proof. Who were they? He had no way to trace the encrypted message. He started digging again, this time on his own terminal, staying away from Jinx's network. He searched for anything related to Omnicorp Tower, atmospheric anomalies and psychotronic resonance. He found technical papers, engineering forums, and then, buried deep in a redacted academic archive, a name. Dr. Maya Lin. She was a brilliant astrophysicist and xenolinguist who had been a rising star at Omnicorp's private research division a decade ago. Her work involved analyzing deep space signals. Then, she had been abruptly dismissed. Her projects were classified, her publications retracted, her name scrubbed from most official records. The official reason was scientific misconduct and mental instability, a classic corporate character assassination. He found a few last traces of her work, fragments of a thesis about null space signal propagation and non-baryonic information carriers. It was theoretical, esoteric science, far beyond his understanding. But one phrase caught his eye in a heavily censored interview transcript. A sentinel pattern, not a message. It does not speak. It waits. A sentinel, a watcher. Dr. Maya Lin was the key. Kaido and Omnicorp had buried her and her research. She was the one person who might have a real answer. Finding her would be difficult. After her dismissal, she had vanished, likely driven deep into the city's anonymous slums to escape Omnicorp's reach. But Locke had a new purpose. They had tried to make him forget, to make him look away. Instead, they had only sharpened his resolve. His kestrel implant chose that moment to flicker again. This time there was no distortion, no monstrous vision. There was only a single, clear image, burned onto his retina for a fraction of a second. It was a star chart, and at the center of it, a single point of absolute darkness, circled in red, with a string of coordinates beneath it. It was not a hallucination. It was data. Phantom data pushed into his implant by the tower's static field. It was a signal leaking through the noise. He scrambled for a pen, his hand shaking, and scribbled the coordinates onto a piece of paper before they could fade from his short-term memory. He had a name, and now he had an address in the sky. He had to find Maya Lin. She was the only one who could tell him what he was looking at. Chapter 4: The Oracle in the Wreckage. The coordinates from the phantom data stream did not lead to a place on any city map. They pointed to a location deep in the sunk, the lowest and oldest sector of Neo-Kyoto, a place where the sun was a myth, and the sky was a ceiling of tangled pipes and conduits dripping with chemical sludge. It was a graveyard of failed businesses and forgotten homes, a place where the city's mapmakers gave up. Getting there required Locke to trade the relative order of the mid-level slums for true, anarchic decay. He wrote a shuddering, rust-streaked maglift down 10 levels, the air growing thick and heavy with each floor he descended. The neon glow of the upper city faded, replaced by the stark, functional light of sodium lamps and the occasional flickering hollow ad for cheap synthale or recycled protein bars. He emerged into a cavernous space that smelled of damp earth, metal rot, and unidentifiable cooking fumes. The sunk was not a street but a sprawling, multi-layered warren. Walkways of rusted metal mesh crisscrossed over canals of black, viscous water. Figures huddled in the shadows, their faces pale, their eyes suspicious. Here, cybernetics were not sleek enhancements but crude, brutalist repairs. A mismatched hydraulic arm, a buzzing optical sensor held in place with duct tape. Locke kept his head down and his hand near the heavy mag pistol tucked in his waistband. He navigated by the faint glow of his data slate, its map a vague approximation of the area. The locals gave him a wide berth. His coat was too clean, his posture too straight. He was an outsider, and outsiders in the sunk were either prey or predators. His journey was a descent through circles of urban hell. He saw a gutter gator, a thick 6-foot reptile with scales that shimmered like oil on water, snatch a screeching wire rat from the edge of a canal, its chrome-laced teeth crunching through bone. He passed a clinic where a cyberdoc with a blowtorch was attaching a metal leg to a screaming man. This was the city's raw, beating heart, stripped of all pretense. The map led him to the edge of a vast, silent structure, the old Kiyomizu Observatory. It was a relic from before the city had grown so tall, a domed building of stained duracrete now dwarfed and crushed by the weight of the sectors built on top of it. Its telescope, once pointed at the stars, was now aimed at the dripping, pipe-choked underbelly of the floor above. The main entrance was sealed, welded shut decades ago. Locke circled the building, his boots crunching on broken glass and discarded machine parts. He found a breach in the wall, a jagged hole where the foundation had crumbled. He squeezed through, his satchel scraping against the rough concrete. Inside, the air was surprisingly dry, and a profound silence reigned. The main observatory chamber was a vast, circular room. The great telescope stood in the center like the skeleton of a forgotten god. The dome above was cracked, allowing thin shafts of dusty light from the sunk's utility lamps to penetrate the gloom. And the entire room, every surface, was covered in writing. Equations, star charts, strange geometric patterns, and lines of text in a dozen languages were scrawled across the walls, the floor, the telescope itself. It was the work of a single, obsessive mind. "If you are from OmniCorp, you are late," a voice said. It was a woman's voice, sharp and brittle. "I dismantled the primary relays 3 years ago. There is nothing here for you to steal." Locke scanned the shadows. He saw her perched on a catwalk near the base of the telescope. She was thin, with short, graying hair and eyes that burned with a fierce, paranoid intensity. She wore a stained mechanic's jumpsuit and held a heavy, industrial wrench like a weapon. This had to be Dr. Maya Lin. "I'm not from OmniCorp," Locke said, holding his hands up slowly to show they were empty. "They just paid me a visit. They're not happy with me." Her eyes narrowed. "Why?" "I took a picture of the man on their tower." Maya Lin went perfectly still, The wrench in her hand lowered an inch. "You saw it," she whispered, her voice a mix of fear and vindication. "You got a clear image." "I did," Locke said. "Your old employers took it from me, wiped my data, called it a sensor ghost." A harsh, bitter laugh escaped her lips. "A sensor ghost, of course. That is what they would call it, the simplest lie." She scrambled down from the catwalk with a surprising agility, her eyes never leaving his. "They erased your proof, but they did not erase you. Why?" "I don't know," Locke admitted. "They let me walk." "Then you are a message," she concluded, her mind working with visible speed. "Or you are bait. They followed you here." "I don't think so. I took precautions." "There are no precautions against Omnicorp," she snapped, gesturing at the walls around them. "This place is a dead zone. No signals in or out. Lead-lined plating I salvaged myself. It is the only reason I am still alive. What do you want from me?" "Answers," Locke said. He took a cautious step closer. "I saw something else, my implant. It's been glitching. The static field around the tower, it's leaking data. I saw a star chart, coordinates." He recited the numbers he had scribbled down. Maya's eyes widened. She rushed to a section of the wall covered in a sprawling, impossibly complex star map. Her finger, stained with ink and grease, traced a path through constellations he did not recognize. She stopped at a point in a seemingly empty patch of space. "Here," she breathed. "The coordinates are for Sector 7G, Quadrant Null, the Kepler 186F system. But that's not what it's pointing at. It's pointing at what's behind it." She grabbed a piece of chalk and drew a large circle around the empty patch of space. "They called me insane. They said my instruments were malfunctioning. I told them a signal did not have to be energy. It could be the absence of it." She turned to face him, her eyes blazing. "For 12 years I tracked it, a patch of space that is not just dark but is actively deleting. It consumes light. It consumes radiation. It consumes gravity. It does not reflect. It does not emit. It is a perfect void, a hole in the fabric of spacetime, and it is moving toward us. I called it the Herald of Silence." Locke stared at her, the scale of what she was saying slowly dawning on him. This was not about a corporate conspiracy. It was not about a ghost on a tower. "And the man on the spire?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "The Watcher?" "It is not a man," she said with chilling certainty. "It is a receiver, a sentinel, an antenna made of something not from our universe. It is not watching us. It is watching for the Herald. It is waiting for it to arrive." She gestured wildly at the equations covering the dome above them. "My calculations were conservative. I thought we had 50 years, 100 maybe, but the Watcher, it only appeared a few years ago. Its presence means the timetable has accelerated. It is a signpost, a final marker." "Arrival of what?" Locke pressed. "What happens when this Herald gets here?" Maya Lin looked at him, and for the first time her fierce intellect was overshadowed by a profound, soul-deep terror. "Imagine a sound," she said, her voice trembling. "Now imagine the perfect, absolute absence of that sound. Not silence, but a void where the concept of sound cannot exist. The Herald does that to reality itself. When it arrives, our star, our planet, this city, everything will be gone. not destroyed, erased, unwritten from the universe. There will be nothing left, not even a memory. A loud crash from the main entrance shattered the silence. A section of the welded door buckled inward, screeching as heavy machinery tore it from its hinges. Bright, focused beams of light flooded the dusty observatory. Maya swore, grabbing Locke's arm. "They did follow you, bait, I knew it." Armored figures, the same kind that had accosted Locke, began pouring into the room. They moved with practiced, disciplined efficiency, their weapons raised. In the center of them stood Warden Kaido, his tailored suit immaculate even in the dust and decay of the sunk. "Dr. Lin," Kaido's amplified voice boomed, echoing in the vast chamber. "Your sabbatical is over. OmniCorp requires your expertise. You will come with us." He turned his helmeted head slightly, his visor fixing on Locke. "And Mr. Kenner, it seems you are incapable of staying away from matters that do not concern you." Maya pulled Locke toward the back of the chamber behind the massive, unmoving telescope. "There is a service tunnel," she hissed, pointing toward a dark opening in the floor. "It leads to the old water reclamation system. Go, take this." She shoved a heavy, shielded data slate into his hands. It was covered in the same frantic scrawls as the walls. "Everything. All my research, my models, my proof. It is all that is left of me. Don't let them have it." A volley of plasma shots erupted, sizzling through the air and impacting the base of the telescope, showering them with hot metal fragments. Locke and Maya were cornered. The tunnel was their only hope, but Kaido's team was advancing, penning them in, their disciplined movements a stark contrast to the chaotic genius of the world they were invading. There was no easy way out. Chapter 5: A Different Kind of Dark. The plasma bolt struck the ancient metal of the telescope with a percussive clang, sending showers of incandescent sparks into the gloom. Locke threw himself and Maya flat behind the massive equatorial mount, the heated air washing over them. The air crackled with ozone and the hum of charged weaponry. Kaido's team was advancing in a classic pincer formation, their movements fluid and economical, designed to cut off all escape. "They're not trying to kill us," Maya hissed, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "They want my research, they want me." "And what about me?" Locke grunted, peering around the edge of the mount. Two guards were flanking left, their rifles sweeping the shadows. You're a loose end," she replied with brutal honesty. "They'll sedate you, scrub your memory so deep you forget your own name, and dump you in a gutter." The service tunnel she'd pointed to was 10 meters away, a dark maw in the floor with a rusted ladder descending into blackness. It might as well have been a kilometer. The space between them and the tunnel was a killing field. "The data slate," Locke said, his mind working frantically. "Is it valuable?" "It's my life's work. It's the only complete record of the Herald's approach." "No, I mean, is it valuable to them?" "Of course, it's why they're here." "Good." Locke pulled the heavy slate from his satchel. He got a firm grip on it. "On my signal, you run for the tunnel. Don't stop. Don't look back, just go." "What are you going to do?" she asked, her eyes wide with alarm. "Create a diversion." He waited, watching the guards. They were closing in, moving from cover to cover. Warden Kaido stood near the entrance, a still point in the chaos, observing. He wanted this done cleanly. "Now!" Locke yelled. He rose from cover and hurled the data slate with all his strength, not at the guards, but in a high arc toward the far side of the chamber. The effect was instantaneous. The disciplined advance faltered as half the guards instinctively turned their attention to the flying object, their mission priority overriding their tactical formation. It was the opening Locke needed. "Go!" he screamed at Maya. She scrambled from behind the telescope, a blur of motion in the dusty air, and sprinted for the tunnel. Locke didn't wait to see if she'd make it. He drew his own mag pistol, a heavy, unreliable piece of junk, and fired 2 shots at the overhead lights illuminating the guards on the right flank. The bulbs shattered, plunging that side of the room into deeper shadow. The response was immediate and overwhelming. A hail of plasma fire converged on his position. He ducked back behind the telescope as the metal screeched and groaned under the onslaught. He could hear Maya's boots clanging on the rungs of the ladder. She was in the tunnel. One of the guards, seeing Maya disappear, redirected his fire toward the tunnel's opening. Locke popped up again and fired, his shot going wide but forcing the guard to take cover. "Secure the package," Kaido's voice boomed, cutting through the din. One of the guards had retrieved the data slate. "Subdue the journalist, non-lethal." Non-lethal was a relative term. A flashbang grenade sailed through the air and detonated near Locke's position. The world dissolved into a blaze of white light and a deafening roar. His senses screamed in protest. His kestrel implant went haywire, flooding his vision with a cascade of error messages and nonsensical geometric patterns. He stumbled back, disoriented, his ears ringing. A heavy blow struck him in the back of the head, and the floor rushed up to meet him. He awoke to the smell of antiseptic and the soft hum of a life support system. He was lying on a cot in a small, white room, the same kind of debriefing room he'd been in before, but this one felt more permanent. There were no doors visible. The walls were seamless. A single, soft light emanated from the ceiling. He sat up, his head throbbing. His clothes were gone, replaced by a simple gray jumpsuit. His gear was nowhere in sight. He felt his head. There was a bandage. He checked behind his ear. The port for his kestrel implant was empty. They had taken it. The thought sent a spike of pure panic through him. His eye, his tool, his connection to the world, it was gone. A section of the wall slid open silently, revealing Warden Kaido. He was no longer in his suit, but in a stark, black Omnicorp uniform. He held a small, transparent case. Inside, resting on a bed of soft foam, was Locke's kestrel implant. "An interesting piece of hardware, Mr. Kenner," Kaido said, his voice calm. "Obsolete, poorly shielded, and running a pirated firmware, prone to external influence." He placed the case on a small table that emerged from the floor. "Where is she?" Locke demanded, his voice raspy. "Dr. Lin is a corporate asset. She is being reintegrated. Her esoteric theories are being evaluated by more stable minds." "You know she's right," Locke said. "You've seen the Watcher." Kaido's expression remained unreadable. "I have seen a persistent anomaly. Dr. Lin has provided a context for it, a highly improbable theatrical context. We will determine the truth. And the data slate is being decrypted. Dr. Lin's personal encryption is creative. It will take time. Kaido pulled up a chair and sat, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. Which brings us to you. You are a problem. You are a witness. And you have a tendency to incite chaos. So what now? Locke asked. You scrub my brain and dump me. That was the original plan, Kaido admitted. However, your implant recorded some fascinating data during its final moments of operation. The phantom data you mentioned to Dr. Lin, the star chart, the coordinates. He leaned forward. My technicians cannot replicate the event. We cannot force the tower's static field to transmit that data. It seems to have a specific affinity for your outdated, glitch-prone hardware, a unique vulnerability, or a unique compatibility. Locke stared at him, understanding dawning. You need me. We need your eye, Kaido corrected. The Watcher has not changed its behavior in the 3 years we have been observing it. It appears, it watches a fixed point in space and it vanishes. It is a constant, but the data you received suggests it is more than a passive observer. It might be a transmitter. And you, Mr. Kenner, appear to be the only receiver we've found. Kaido's proposition was as cold and clear as his eyes. We are returning you to the city. We will provide you with a new identity, a new apartment with a clear view of the tower, and a monthly stipend that will make your previous earnings irrelevant. We will return your implant. In exchange, you will do for us what you were doing for your own curiosity. You will watch the Watcher. You will document everything you see, every glitch, every phantom data stream. You will become our dedicated censor. You want to hire me? Locke asked in disbelief. After all this? I am not hearing you, Mr. Kenner. I am repurposing you. You will be an asset. You will report only to me. Any deviation, any attempt to contact outside sources, any mention of Dr. Lin or the Herald of Silence, and your new life will be revoked. Painfully. It was a cage, a comfortable, gilded cage, but a cage nonetheless. He would be Omnicorp's pet, their tame oracle, living under the constant threat of Kaido's leash. But what choice did he have? Refusal meant a memory scrub or a quiet death. Acceptance meant survival. It meant he could keep watching. It meant he was still in the game. And more importantly, it meant he had access to the tower, with Omnicorp's blessing. There's one more thing, Kaido said, as if reading his mind. The data slate you so theatrically threw, it was a decoy. Locke blinked. Dr. Lin is clever, Kaido continued, a hint of grudging respect in his voice. The slate you had was filled with corrupted files and looping, nonsensical equations, a trap for our decryption programs. She gave you a fake. A slow smile spread across Locke's face. Maya had played them. She had played him. She had trusted him with a decoy, ensuring that her real data remained safe. Where was it? Did she have it on her? Or had she hidden it somewhere else? It seems you are both more resourceful than your files suggest, Kaido said, rising from his chair. It changes little. We have the source of the data now. We have Dr. Lin, and we have you. He slid the case, with Locke's implant across the table. Your new life begins tomorrow, Kaido stated. "Make a wise choice, Mr. Kenner." The wall slid shut, leaving Locke alone in the sterile white room. He picked up the case, his eye, his curse, and his gift. Kaido thought he was putting a dog on a leash, but he was mistaken. He was giving a weapon back to a man who now had nothing left to lose and pointing him directly at the heart of the mystery. Locke would play the part. He would be their censor. He would watch the watcher. And he would find a way to uncover the truth Kaido and Omnicorp were so desperate to control. The game had changed, but it was far from over. Chapter 6: The Gilded Cage. The apartment was a sterile womb of white and gray. It was located on the 140th floor of the Sahikone building, a residential spire that Omnicorp owned through 3 shell companies. From the floor-to-ceiling armored glass of the main living area, the Omnicorp tower dominated the view. It was a perfect, unobstructed shot, a constant, silent reminder of Locke's new purpose. The rain, a familiar companion in his slum dwelling, was invisible at this height. The city below was a silent, sprawling circuit board of light blurred by the perpetual clouds. There was no key. The apartment recognized his biometric signature. The lights adjusted to his presence. The air temperature remained a constant, sterile 22 degrees Celsius. The food synthesizer produced nutrient-balanced meals that were as tasteless as the ones he'd eaten below, but infinitely more sophisticated in their blandness. He was a specimen in a pristine terrarium. On the second day, a courier in a featureless gray uniform delivered a single, hermetically sealed case. Inside was his kestrel implant. It looked the same, but it felt different in his hand, heavier. When he slotted it into the port behind his ear, the boot-up sequence was not the glitchy, pirated flicker he was used to. It was a smooth, clean initialization, culminating in the appearance of a small, unobtrusive Omnicorp logo in the bottom corner of his vision. It was a watermark on his soul. Calibration complete. A synthesized voice, Kaido's voice, spoke directly into his mind through the implant's auditory feed. "Your vitals are nominal. Your reporting channel is now active. I expect your first log by 0300 hours." The voice vanished, leaving a profound silence. He was leashed. The first week was a study in monotonous dread. Every night Locke would sit by the window, his analog camera a useless prop on the table beside him. He did not need it anymore. His implant could capture and store images in perfect, lossless fidelity. At 2:00 a.m. the Watcher would appear on the spire. It was as jarring and instantaneous as ever. A cut in reality. A sudden, vertical scar of absolute black against the sky. He watched, he recorded. He logged the duration, the atmospheric conditions, the tower's energy output readings, which were now fed directly to his implant. He described the Watcher's unnerving stillness, the way it seemed to absorb the city's light without reflection. He sent the reports, concise and clinical, into the void of Kaido's network. He received no replies. He was a camera, a human sensor, and nothing more. He spent his days testing the boundaries of his cage. He searched for listening devices but found none. The surveillance was likely embedded in the very walls in the air filtration system. He tried to access the public datanet, but his connection was heavily firewalled. He had access to entertainment streams, news feeds approved by Omnicorp, and nothing else. His world had shrunk to this single, luxurious room and the silent, black figure on the horizon. The isolation began to wear on him. He started talking to himself, his own voice a strange intrusion in the apartment's oppressive quiet. He paced the floor, the soft synth carpet muffling his steps, until he felt he would wear a groove in the pristine surface. He was a ghost in a machine-made heaven, and his personal hell was the silent, patient vigil he was forced to keep. On the eighth night, something changed. The Watcher appeared as scheduled. Locke initiated the recording sequence, his gaze fixed on the spire. The city lights below shimmered, their glow diffused by the low-hanging clouds. Then the static came. It was not the aggressive, painful noise from before. It was a soft, insidious whisper in the back of his mind, a sound like dry leaves skittering across pavement. And a word began to form out of the noise. It was not a word he understood. It was guttural, ancient. Shall, hull, gull. It repeated over and over, a mantra of dust and echoes. He tried to focus on it, to discern its meaning, but it remained just outside the grasp of his comprehension. He logged the auditory phenomenon, describing it as low-frequency, rhythmic static. He did not mention the word. It was the first secret he had kept from Kaido, a tiny, pathetic act of rebellion. Then his vision flickered. It was a violent, tearing glitch that made him gasp. For less than a second, the image of the spire doubled. He saw the Watcher, stark and black, and standing beside it, ephemeral and transparent like a photographic afterimage, was a second figure. It was identical in shape and size, but it was made not of blackness, but of blinding, internal light. The image vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving him staring at the lone, dark figure. His heart hammered in his chest, a ghost of a ghost, a light to the other's shadow. He replayed his implant's recording of the last 10 seconds. The visual glitch was there, a single corrupted frame. Indisputable. He had to report it. It was too significant to hide. He logged the event, describing it as a momentary visual duplication with inverted luminosity. He attached the corrupted frame as evidence. He said nothing of the word that still echoed in the quiet corners of his mind. He sent the report. This time he got a reply. Kaido's synthesized voice filled his head, sharp and immediate. Continue observation. Report any further duplication instantly. The line went dead. Locke stared at the tower, a new, terrifying thought taking root. He had assumed the Watcher was alone. What if it was? What if it was only one half of a conversation? He felt a profound, bone-deep chill that had nothing to do with the apartment's regulated temperature. He was no longer just watching a silent sentinel. He was eavesdropping on something vast and ancient, and he was beginning, just barely, to hear its voice. The word pulsed in his memory. Shall, hull, gull. It felt like a name, or a warning. Chapter 7. Echoes in the Static. The word was a splinter in his mind. Shall, hull, gull. He wrote it down on a flimsy piece of synth paper, the only truly analog recording method he had left. He stared at the strange syllables, trying to force meaning from them. It was useless. He needed a specialist, a linguist, but his world was a sealed box. Jinx was out of the question. Kaido had made it clear that any contact with his old life would have consequences. He needed someone off the grid. someone Kaido wouldn't think to monitor. An image surfaced from the depths of his memory, from a case years ago involving a stolen manuscript. A man who lived surrounded by paper and ink. A man who had traded his own memory for a library. The archivist. Getting to him was the problem. Locke's every movement was tracked. His vitals, his location. It was all an open book to Kaido. But even the most perfect system has flaws. The surveillance in his apartment was constant, but it was likely automated. A security program flagging anomalies, not Kaido himself watching a screen 24 hours a day. He needed to create a plausible glitch, a moment of static long enough for him to slip out. His apartment had a wellness feature, a sonic shower in the small bathroom. It used high-frequency resonance to clean the body, a process that created a significant amount of signal interference. The building's manual, which he had read out of sheer boredom, warned that it could temporarily disrupt local biometric sensors. It was a tiny crack in the prison wall. He planned it meticulously. He waited until midday, when Kaido's attention would likely be focused on corporate matters. He initiated the sonic shower, the low hum filling the apartment. Then, using a small, powerful magnet he'd salvaged from an old audio speaker, he disrupted the biometric reader on the inside of his apartment door, forcing it into a reboot cycle. The combination of the two events should create a brief, localized dead zone in the surveillance log. It would look like a hardware malfunction, he hoped. He had a 10-minute window, maybe 15. He slipped out of the apartment, wearing the generic gray clothes he'd been issued. He moved quickly, using service corridors instead of the main elevators, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. He was outside. The mid-level slums felt alien. The crowds, the smells, the noise. It was an assault on his senses after the sterile silence of his cage. He kept his head down, a nondescript man in a sea of millions. He navigated the familiar, rain-slicked streets to a sector known for its black market book dealers and antique tech hoarders. The archivist's den was at the back of a shop that sold old, magnetic tape media. The air inside was thick with the scent of aging paper and dust. Locke found him in a small, cramped room, sitting before a desk piled high with decaying books. The archivist himself was a withered man, his eyes replaced with dull, brass-colored optical sensors that whirred softly as they scanned the pages of a crumbling tome. "The shop is closed," the archivist said, not looking up. His voice was a dry monotone, a stark contrast to Jinx's theatrical scrambling. "I'm not a customer," Locke said quietly. "I have a query, a linguistic one." The brass eyes swiveled to focus on him. They clicked and whirred, the lenses adjusting. "Your face is not in my active index. State the query." Locke slid the piece of synth paper across the desk. The archivist's eyes scanned the word. The whirring of his optics intensified. "Source language, Proto-Akkadian. A dead dialect from prehistoric Mesopotamia, Old Earth, primarily used in Third Dynasty rituals. The phonemes are slightly corrupted, suggesting a degraded transmission." Locke leaned forward, his pulse quickening. "What does it mean?" The archivist tilted his head. "The translation is not precise. The term is compound. Shall, to undo, to release. Hull, that which is evil or wrong. Gull, a larger form, a spirit, a vastness. A literal translation would be the great unmaking evil. A more contextual translation would be the spirit of dissolution. Dissolution, unmaking. The words echoed Maya Lin's theory of the herald of silence, not destruction, erasure. "Thank you," Locke said, his mind reeling. He turned to leave, his window of time closing fast. "Query," the archivist's voice stopped him. The brass eyes were fixed on him with an unnerving intensity. "A secondary scan of public municipal records shows your biosignature, Lachlan Kenner, flagged as decommissioned as of 14:00 yesterday. Your current vital signs are being actively broadcast from a secure server location registered to OmniCorp Holding, Sublevel 7. The presence of your physical body in this location is a paradox. Anomaly detected." Locke froze, his blood turned to ice. Kaido knew. The glitch hadn't fooled the system. His escape wasn't a secret, it was a test, and he had failed. He didn't say another word. He bolted from the shop, shoving his way through the crowded street. He had to get back. He had to be inside that apartment when the system's paradox flag reached a human operator. He ran, the city's chaos a blur around him. The freedom he had felt moments ago was gone, replaced by the cold certainty that the walls of his cage were not physical. They were digital, and they were closing in. He burst into the service corridor of his building, his lungs burning. He scrambled up the stairs, his legs aching. He reached his floor and ran to his door. He pressed his palm against the reader. It glowed green. He stumbled inside, sealing the door behind him just as the sonic shower cycle ended with a low chime. He stood in the center of the silent apartment, panting, sweat dripping down his face. Had he made it? His implant chimed. It was Kaido's voice, no longer synthesized but his actual voice, dripping with a quiet, lethal disappointment. "You are resourceful, Mr. Kenner, but you are predictable. Enjoy your walk." Locke didn't answer. There was nothing to say. "Curiosity is a dangerous flaw," Kaido continued. "I had hoped to cultivate your focus. It seems I must provide a more direct lesson. Open your main viewing screen." With a sense of profound dread, Locke turned to the large screen on the wall. It flickered to life, showing a high-altitude satellite view of a familiar alley. The alley with the faded kanji for silence on the door. Jinx's Alley. A white, unmarked van was parked at one end. Figures in full hazmat gear, the kind used for chemical spills, were spraying the walls and the door with a thick, viscous foam. They were not cleaning. They were sterilizing, erasing. "Infobrokers are a blight," Kaido's voice said, cold and emotionless. "They create instability. My duty is to ensure the smooth operation of this city. Sometimes that requires sanitation." The message was brutally clear. This was not a punishment for him. This was a demonstration. His actions had consequences not for himself but for anyone he touched. He was a contagion. The screen went blank. Locke sank onto the floor, the pristine carpet cool against his skin. He had not only failed, he had brought ruin upon one of the few people who had ever helped him. He was not just a prisoner in a gilded cage. He was a weapon that Kaido could aim at will. The weight of his guilt was a physical thing, pressing down on him, suffocating him in the silent, perfect room. Chapter 8: The Zero-Point Dog. Guilt was a poor motivator. It curdled into a cold, simmering rage that Locke had to bury deep beneath a veneer of compliance. He did not leave the apartment again. He sent his nightly reports, detailed and precise, stripped of any personal insight. He was the perfect censor, the obedient tool. He watched Kaido's live feed of Jinx's alley being bricked over, the entrance becoming just another patch of anonymous, stained wall. He watched, and he let the anger harden inside him. His vigil changed. He still watched the tower, but his attention was now split. He spent hours studying the city below, looking for, he wasn't sure what, a pattern, an anomaly Kaido's systems might miss, a crack in the monolithic facade of Omni-Corp's control. It was during this obsessive scanning of the mundane that he first noticed the dog. The area at the base of the Omni-Corp tower was a vast, windswept plaza of polished black granite. It was always empty. The low-level psychotronic field that bathed the area, the same static that had once given him migraines, was a powerful deterrent to organic life. Birds never roosted on the nearby ledges. Wire rats never scurried across its expanse. People hurried along its edges, their faces tight with discomfort. But every day, a dog would be there. It was a scruffy, medium-sized mutt, its fur a matted patchwork of brown and gray. It would wander into the center of the plaza, seemingly oblivious to the oppressive field that should have driven it away, and lie down. It would rest for hours, a single, living island in a sterile sea of stone. Locke started calling it the Zero-Point Dog, a creature that seemed to exist at a null state within the tower's influence. He recorded it, of course. He logged it as anomalous canine life form, apparently immune to psychotronic field effects. He received no response. To Kaido, a stray dog was likely less than a rounding error. To Locke, it was a puzzle. For weeks the routine held. The dog would appear. The watcher would appear. Locke would watch them both. The dog never seemed to react to the figure on the spire. It would sleep or scratch or watch the distant, scurrying figures of people with a lazy indifference. Then came the night of the storm. A savage, electrical storm rolled in from the coast, a rare event in the city's manufactured weather patterns. The sky was a churning mass of black and violet. Bolts of jagged, white lightning tore through the clouds, their thunderous reports echoing even in Locke's soundproofed apartment. The tower was a lightning rod. It was struck again and again, the energy discharges safely channeled into the city's power grid. Locke watched, fascinated, as the watcher appeared at its scheduled time, a sliver of perfect blackness amidst the celestial chaos. It was utterly unaffected by the storm, a point of absolute stillness in a world of violence. Down below in the plaza, the Zero-Point Dog was on its feet. It was not scared. It stood foursquare, its head raised, its matted fur whipped by the wind and rain. It was staring directly at the spire. As a particularly massive bolt of lightning struck the tower's antenna, a blinding flash that overloaded Locke, implant for a second, the dog did something new. It threw its head back and let out a single, low, mournful howl. The sound itself was insignificant, lost in the roar of the storm. But at that exact moment, Locke's world shattered. His kestrel implant did not just glitch, it was hijacked. His vision was wiped, replaced by a flood of pure data. It was not a word or a star chart. It was a pattern, a vast and complex schematic of impossible detail that seemed to be overlaid on the entire city. It was a web of intricate, glowing lines, some thick, some thin, connecting thousands of points of light. It was a circuit diagram on a planetary scale. It pulsed with a cold, blue light, and at its absolute center, blazing like a dying sun, was the Omnicorp Tower. The vision lasted for 3 seconds, an eternity. Then it was gone, leaving him gasping, the image seared into his memory. He stumbled back from the window, his hands shaking. The dog was the key. It wasn't just immune to the field, it was interacting with it. It was an amplifier, a tuning fork, a biological key that, when struck by the storm's energy and the Watcher's presence, had momentarily unlocked a new layer of the signal. He replayed his implant's recording. The schematic was there, captured in a burst of corrupted data frames. It was real. He had to understand it. He sent a priority report to Kaido. Massive data surge correlated with atmospheric electrical discharge. Significant structural pattern detected. Requesting access to municipal infrastructure archives for cross-referencing. He framed it as a security threat, a potential weakness in the city's power grid that the anomaly might be exploiting. It was a gamble, but the image was too compelling to ignore. He waited. For an hour there was no reply. He paced the apartment, the image of the great circuit burning in his mind. Finally, his implant chimed. "Access granted," Kaido's voice said. It sounded different, strained. "You have 48 hours. Find the source of this pattern." Locke turned to his terminal, a new, ferocious energy surging through him. He was no longer a passive observer. The dog had given him a map to the tower's true purpose, and he would follow it no matter where it led. Chapter 9: The Wrong Angles. For 2 days Locke did not sleep. He lived at the terminal, his world reduced to the glowing schematic and the endless streams of municipal data Kaido had unlocked for him. He was a man possessed, fueled by nutrient paste and a burning, obsessive need to understand. He cross-referenced the glowing lines from his vision with the city's infrastructure grids: power, water, transit, data comms. There were overlaps, faint correlations with major power conduits and old fiber-optic backbones, but the pattern did not match. It was like trying to lay a modern road map over an ancient one. The landmarks were all wrong. Frustration gnawed at him. The map was real, he was certain of it, but it was a map of a city that didn't seem to exist. He started digging deeper, into archived city plans, historical records, zoning documents from before the great corporate reconstruction a century ago. And then he found it. The schematic was not a map of the current city. It was a near-perfect match for the original, pre-corporate Neo-Kyoto, before the sunk was formally buried, before Omnicorp and its rivals had scraped the sky with their new towers. The lines of energy in his vision corresponded to the old subway lines, the buried water mains, the foundational pylons of a city that was now a ruin beneath their feet. The circuit was real, but it was ancient and broken. Many of the connection points on his map led to demolition zones, sealed-off sectors and places that were now just bedrock hundreds of meters underground. But the central point, the hub of the entire network, was undeniable. It was the exact location where the Omnicorp Tower now stood. The tower had not been built there by accident. It had been built on the nexus of this ancient, forgotten circuit. As he stared at the map, a phrase from his past research on the nightly statue came back to him from one of the Paranoid Fringe forums. A post by a user named Geometrician, who had been ridiculed for his ravings about the city's wrong angles. Locke used his limited access to search for the user's handle. He found a string of increasingly erratic posts, then a final one, a public maintenance request filed with the city for unauthorized structural modifications in the abandoned Shinjuku Transit Hub. The request was flagged as delusional and dismissed. The hub was deep in the old city foundations, a place no one had used in 50 years. He had to get there. He had to speak to this geometrician. But his last field trip had ended in disaster. Kaido's leash was short and the consequences of pulling on it were severe. He couldn't go himself. He needed a proxy, someone who could navigate the guts of the city without leaving a digital trail. Someone fast, resourceful, and unafraid of condemned zones. He thought of Pilfer, the rooftop courier. He had put a target on their back, but he had also saved their life on that rooftop in a way. He owed them, or maybe they owed him. It was complicated. Contacting them was the challenge. His comms were a direct line to Kaido. He couldn't send a message, but he could send a file. He went back to his report on the visual duplication, the one with the single corrupted frame of the two watchers. He opened the image file in a hex editor. Within the raw data of the image, in the junk code that the system would read as part of the corruption, he embedded a simple, encrypted message. Pilfer Courier, I need a guide. Shinjuku Hub, the geometrician, I can pay. I can also clear your debt with Jinx's successors. It was a shot in the dark. He had no idea if Pilfer would ever see it or how. He attached the corrupted image file to a new, mundane report about sensor decay and sent it to Kaido. But instead of routing it through the secure channel, he pushed it to a public Omnicorp technical forum, flagging it as a common hardware issue. He disguised it as an open query, a message in a bottle thrown into an ocean of data. He could only hope that a courier, who made their living moving sensitive information, knew how to trawl those oceans for whispers and secrets. He leaned back, the screen's glow illuminating his exhausted face. The waiting was the hardest part. He was placing his trust in a ghost, a rooftop runner he barely knew. He watched the silent tower, the switch at the center of a dead circuit, and wondered if he was chasing another ghost, a madman in a forgotten tomb. But the image of the great schematic was burned into his mind. It was a truth waiting to be uncovered, and he had a feeling the geometrician was the only one left who knew how to read it. Chapter 10. The Courier's Debt. 3 days passed, 3 cycles of watching, reporting, and waiting. Locke's hope had begun to curdle into the familiar taste of despair. He had thrown his message into the void, and the void had not answered. Kaido's 48-hour window had closed. His access to the city archives was revoked, leaving him once more with nothing but the view from his window. On the 4th night, a notification appeared on his terminal. It was not from Kaido. It was an anonymous delivery confirmation from a slum-level noodle bar. A single meal had been purchased and was waiting for him. Attached was a simple text file containing a time and a location, a service access point for the old water reclamation system, deep in Sector 9 at midnight. It was a place no one would look, a place that reeked of anonymity. It was pilfer. Getting out was the same risky maneuver as before. The sonic shower, the magnet on the door lock, the frantic race through service corridors. This time the fear was sharper. He knew the system was watching, learning his tricks. He found the access point, a rusted circular hatch in a forgotten alley. As he approached, a figure detached itself from the shadows. It was Pilfer, clad in their familiar light armor, their face obscured by a dark hood. "You're a slow learner." Pilfer's voice was a low, filtered rasp. They held up a small data slate showing the picture Locke had taken of them. Jinx's network might be gone, but the data had survived, passed on to others in the info trade. "This picture cost me 2 high-paying clients. I should break your legs and sell your fancy implant for parts." "The info I have is worth more," Locke countered, his voice steady despite his hammering heart. "Jinx's successors are just one problem. OmniCorp is a bigger one. I can give you the location of a server farm they're decommissioning. Low security, full of last-gen hardware and encrypted corporate data chips. A scrapper's paradise." Pilfer considered this, their hooded head tilted. "And what do you want in return? A guide to a tomb for a madman." "I need to talk to him. It's about the tower." That got their attention. Pilfer looked up past the rooftops toward the distant, unseen spire. "Everyone's jumpy about the tower lately. Fine. You get your guide, I get my server farm, and we are even. You don't know me, I don't know you." "Deal," Locke agreed. Pilfer popped open the hatch. "Stay close, don't touch anything, and try not to breathe too deep." The world that followed was one of dripping darkness and echoing silence. Pilfer moved with a silent, confident grace through a labyrinth of forgotten tunnels. They navigated by memory, their feet sure on slick, narrow ledges above deep, black water. This was their territory, the city's secret circulatory system. For the first time, Locke felt a grudging respect for the courier. They were a survivor, perfectly adapted to this urban wreckage. After what felt like an hour, they emerged into a vast, cavernous space. It was the Shinjuku Transit Hub. Colossal, dust-choked mag trains sat silent on their tracks like beached whales. The air was heavy still, and every surface—the walls, the trains, the floor—was covered in a chaotic explosion of geometric patterns, equations, and diagrams. It was the work of the geometrician. They found him in the old control room, a withered man in tattered clothes, hunched over a cracked terminal, tracing patterns on the dusty screen with a bony finger. He looked up as they approached, his eyes wild and unfocused. "More pilgrims to the broken house," the old man rasped, his voice thin as paper. "I saw the circuit," Locke said, getting straight to the point. He projected the schematic from his implant onto the wall. The geometrician's eyes widened, a flicker of lucidity cutting through the madness. "Ah, you see its true skin. They built the house on a weak foundation, a dead circuit." "What is it for?" Locke pressed. "It is a channel, a conduit. The old man cackled, scrambling to his feet. He pointed a trembling finger at the Omnicorp tower on Locke's projection. That is the switch. It gathers the city's faint heartbeat, the resonance of life, of thought, of fear. It focuses it. But the circuit is incomplete. It leaks. The energy goes nowhere. He staggered over to a huge, hand-drawn map on the wall, a more detailed version of Locke's own. The old masters, they knew, they tried to build a key, a way to complete the circuit, to ground the energy, but they failed. They buried their failure. He tapped a specific point on the map, a location deep in the sunk, even deeper than Maya Lin's observatory. The keystone, a resonance chamber of pure crystal lattice. It was never installed, never activated. Without it, the switch just builds a charge. It calls to the wrong angles. It thins the walls between worlds. A sudden, loud noise echoed from the far end of the hub. A rhythmic, heavy scraping followed by a high-pitched skittering. "What was that?" Locke asked, turning to Pilfer. Pilfer's body went tense. Sanitation bot, an old one. Their logic cores get corrupted. They wander down here, drawn to old power sources. A hulking shape lurched into view from behind a dead train. It was a synth strider, a 20-foot automaton of mismatched scrap metal, hydraulic limbs, and tangled wiring. A single red optical sensor glowed in its head, a repurposed traffic light. It moved with a twitching, unnatural gait, its clawed metal feet scraping gouges in the concrete floor. It was a mindless, terrifying thing, and its red eye was fixed directly on them. "We need to go," Pilfer hissed, drawing a sleek, high-frequency blade. The geometrician just laughed, a high, unhinged sound. "Too late, the house is waking up. The wrong angles have found the door." The synth strider let out a screech of distorted static and charged, its heavy limbs pounding against the floor, closing the distance with terrifying speed. There was no clear path out. They were trapped. Chapter 11: The Keystone's Echo. The synth strider's charge was a terrifying cacophony of screeching metal and pounding hydraulics. Its single red eye was locked on them, a beacon of mindless aggression. The geometrician cackled, a high, thin sound of pure mania, seemingly delighted by the arrival of the monstrous automaton. "Split up," Pilfer yelled, shoving Locke toward a narrow gap between a train car and the control room wall. "It can't follow us both." Pilfer darted in the opposite direction, their high-frequency blade humming to life with a low thrum. The synth strider, its logic core unable to process two targets at once, hesitated for a split second, its head unit swiveling between them. That hesitation was all Pilfer needed. They slid under a sweeping, scythe-like limb and drove their blade into the tangled mess of hydraulic hoses at the creature's knee joint. Pressurized fluid sprayed out with a hiss, and the strider's leg buckled. It let out a shriek of tortured machinery and swiped at Pilfer, who was already scrambling away, using the silent train cars for cover. Locke used the distraction to drag the geometrician into the relative safety of the control room. The old man was surprisingly light, a bundle of skin and bones. "The keystone," the geometrician rasped, his eyes still wide with a delirious glee. "It's not just a rock, it's a song. It sings the city's true name." Outside, the strider had recovered. It was dragging its damaged leg, its movements now more erratic, more furious. It began to methodically smash the train cars, tearing through the metal with its powerful claws, searching for the agile courier that had wounded it. "We can't stay here," Locke said, his mind racing. He looked at the old man's sprawling map on the wall. The location marked Keystone was deep, buried under sectors of the city that had been collapsed and built over for a century. Getting there was impossible. "Is there another way to it?" Locke asked, pointing at the map. "A service tunnel, a maintenance shaft." "No, no, no," the geometrician chittered. "The masters sealed the way, they feared its voice, they buried it in a concrete tomb." He paused, a flicker of something like cunning in his mad eyes. "But they couldn't bury the echo. The chamber was built on a natural spring, a geothermal vent. The water remembers the song." He pointed a trembling finger at another part of the map. A thin, blue line snaked its way up from the marked location of the keystone, through countless layers of rock and foundation, finally terminating at a water reclamation plant in the lower sunk. "The water carries the echo," the old man whispered. "Faint, distorted, but it's there." A deafening crash shook the control room as the Strider tore the door from its hinges. The hulking automaton filled the doorway, its red eye pulsing. It had lost interest in pilfer. Its primary sensor was now fixed on the new source of noise. Locke grabbed the geometrician's arm. "Where's the exit?" "The house has many doors." The old man giggled, pointing to a ventilation grate in the floor. Locke kicked the grate open. Below was a dark, narrow shaft. He pushed the old man toward it. "Go." The Strider lumbered into the room. Locke fired his mag pistol, the shots ricocheting harmlessly off its armored chassis. He needed to buy time. He saw the cracked terminal the geometrician had been using. It was still powered, drawing residual energy from the station's ancient core. An idea, desperate and probably suicidal, sparked in his mind. He scrambled over to the control panel, pulling open a maintenance hatch. Inside was a mess of thick, archaic power cables. He ripped one of the main conduits free, sparks showering his hands. The Strider was almost upon him, a clawed hand reaching. Locke jammed the live end of the conduit into the Strider, exposed knee joint, where Pilfer's blade had ruptured the casing. The effect was cataclysmic. A massive surge of raw power coursed through the automaton's chassis. It convulsed violently, every motor and servo locking up at once. Its red eye flickered and died. A wave of electrical feedback blew out the terminal, plunging the room into darkness. The synth Strider stood frozen for a second, a silent metal statue, before crashing to the floor with a ground-shaking boom. Locke lay on the floor, his ears ringing, the smell of burnt electronics filling his nostrils. "That was loud," Pilfer's voice came from the doorway. They were unharmed, their blade now silent. They looked from the twitching wreckage of the Strider to Locke. "You're more trouble than you're worth, journalist." "The feeling is mutual," Locke coughed, pushing himself up. "The old man." "Down the vent. He moves fast for a lunatic." They found the geometrician in a maintenance tunnel below, humming to himself as he scrawled a new set of equations on the grimy wall with a piece of chalk he'd produced from a pocket. "The water reclamation plant," Locke said to Pilfer. "Can you get us there?" Pilfer looked from the madman to Locke, then sighed, a sound of pure resignation. "The server farm you promised me had better be worth this." The journey back up through the city's forgotten pathways was a tense, silent affair. The geometrician was lost in his own world, occasionally stopping to correct the angles of a tunnel wall with his chalk. Pilfer led them with a grim efficiency, their earlier respect for Locke replaced with a wary professionalism. This was a job, and a messy one. They reached the reclamation plant as the first hint of the upper city's artificial dawn filtered down into the sunk. The plant was a colossal, decaying facility, a cathedral of rust and corroded pipes. The air was thick with the humid, chemical smell of treated water. In the center of the main chamber were a series of vast, circular filtration pools, the water churning slowly. "The song is strongest here," the geometrician whispered, his eyes wide. He staggered toward the edge of the largest pool. Locke followed him, his kestrel implant, now repaired and back in its socket, scanning the area. He saw nothing unusual, just dirty water in a forgotten factory. "I don't see anything," Locke said. "You are not looking. You are seeing," the geometrician corrected. "You must listen with the right ear." He gestured to Locke's cybernetic eye. Locke frowned but focused his implant sensors on the water. He cranked up the gain on its auditory sensors, filtering out the ambient noise of the plant. At first, there was nothing but the gurgle of water and the distant hum of machinery. Then he caught it. It was a sound so faint it was barely perceptible, a high-frequency vibration deep within the water. It was not a single tone but a complex, multi-layered harmonic, a chord of impossible richness. It was the echo, the keystone's song. As he focused on the sound, his implant began to react. The harmonic was like a tuning fork for the strange energies that permeated his chrome. The world began to shift. The edges of the filtration pool wavered, and for a split second, he saw the water not as a liquid, but as a flowing current of crystalline light. The harmonic resonated with the latent programming in his eye, the code Kaito had installed, and a new overlay flickered across his vision. It was not a map. It was a single repeating symbol, glowing in the same cold blue light as the city circuit. A sigil. It looked like a stylized key. "The resonance key," he breathed. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the air. A precise, whirring noise from above. Locke looked up. Descending from the shadowed ceiling on silent repulsor lifts were three figures. They wore the stark, white contamination suits of the cleaners. They had been tracked, or the geometrician, a known anomaly, had finally tripped a silent alarm. The cleaners landed without a sound, their movements perfectly synchronized. They did not carry weapons. They carried silver canisters that hissed with vapor. "Memory worms," Pilfer spat, recognizing the technology. They shoved Locke and the geometrician back. "Don't let them touch you. Don't breathe the air." The cleaners advanced, their featureless helmets turning to face each of them. They were not here to kill. They were here to erase. To scrub the scene, to wipe the memories of everyone present, to reset the anomaly to zero. They were the system's antibodies, and they had found the infection. Chapter 12. The White Erasure. The cleaners advanced in a perfect, silent triangle. The hissing from their canisters grew louder, and a faint, colorless vapor began to fog the air around them. Pilfer pulled a rebreather mask from their belt and slapped it over their face. "Run!" they yelled, their voice muffled. "Back to the tunnels." But the geometrician was mesmerized. He stood at the edge of the pool, his arms outstretched as if to embrace the approaching figures. "The white angels! They have come to silence the wrong song." Locke grabbed the old man's arm, but he was rooted to the spot, a rapturous, insane smile on his face. One of the cleaners raised its canister and fired a concentrated jet of the aerosol directly at the geometrician. The old man inhaled deeply, his smile freezing on his face. His eyes went blank, the fire of madness extinguished, replaced by a placid, terrifying emptiness. He stood there, a living statue, his mind wiped clean. "Leave him," Pilfer shouted, pulling at Locke. "He's gone." Locke hesitated, a wave of revulsion washing over him. The cleaner's method was so absolute, so sterile. It was worse than death. Another cleaner targeted them. Pilfer shoved Locke behind a massive, rusted pumping station and fired a grapple line into the catwalks high above. With a whir of its motor, the line zipped them upward, out of the main concentration of the memory worm vapor. They landed hard on the graded walkway, the filtration pools and the three white figures shrinking below them. "They'll follow," Pilfer said, already moving. "Their suits have mobility enhancers." Locke risked a glance down. The three cleaners were looking up at them. One of them raised an arm, and a section of the catwalk 50 feet ahead of them exploded in a shower of sparks, severed by a precision laser. Their path was cut off. "They have weapons now," Locke yelled over the noise of the plant. "They are adapting," Pilfer replied, their voice tight. "This is not a standard sanitation sweep." They were trapped on a narrow stretch of walkway, with a sheer drop on one side and advancing cleaners on the other. Below, the geometrician stood unmoving, a permanent fixture in the decaying factory. Locke's mind raced. He thought of the echo in the water, the K-shaped sigil his implant had shown him. The cleaners were here because of that discovery. The system was protecting the secret of the keystone. "The water," Locke said, an idea forming. "The harmonic. It interacts with OmniCorp tech." He pointed at the massive pipe that ran alongside the catwalk, one of the main conduits feeding the filtration pool. "We need to turn it up." Pilfer stared at him as if he were as mad as the geometrician. "Turn what up?" "The song," Locke yelled. He ran to a junction box on the wall, prying it open with his bare hands. Inside was a tangle of ancient wiring. He didn't know what he was doing, but he knew he needed more power, more flow. He began to rip the wires free, rerouting the plant's dormant energy directly into the pumps connected to the main conduit. The pipe beside them groaned, then began to shudder violently as the pressure inside skyrocketed. Below, the water in the filtration pool began to churn, no longer a slow swirl but a furious vortex. The faint, high-frequency harmonic Locke had detected earlier began to climb in pitch and volume, resonating through the metal structure of the plant. The effect on the cleaners was immediate and profound. Their synchronized advance faltered. One of them stopped, its head twitching from side to side. The advanced technology in their suits, designed by Omni Corp, was vulnerable to the very thing it was sent to contain. The harmonic rose to an ear-splitting shriek. The cleaners convulsed. The white, seamless material of their suits began to flicker and glitch, as if their own molecular structure was being undone. One of them dissolved entirely into a shower of white static, vanishing with a soft hiss. The other two, their forms wavering, turned their lasers not on Locke and Pilfer, but on the source of the interference, the main conduit. "Get down," Locke screamed, pulling Pilfer to the floor of the catwalk. Two beams of coherent light struck the shuddering pipe. The old, corroded metal, already under immense pressure, could not withstand the assault. The pipe ruptured with a cataclysmic explosion. A torrent of highly pressurized, energized water erupted outwards, tearing the catwalk from its moorings. Locke and Pilfer were thrown into the air. For a terrifying moment, Locke was weightless, tumbling through the humid, vapor-filled space. He caught a final glimpse of the two remaining cleaners being consumed by the blast, their forms disintegrating like ghosts in the deluge. Then he hit the water of a lower filtration pool with a bone-jarring impact, the world dissolving into a chaotic, churning darkness. He struggled toward the surface, his lungs burning. He broke through, gasping for air, and found Pilfer a few feet away, treading water. The plant was a wreck. The main filtration chamber was flooded. Alarms were blaring and steam hissed from a dozen broken pipes, but they were alive. They swam to the edge of the pool and dragged themselves out, exhausted and soaked. The geometrician was gone, likely swept away by the flood. There was no sign of the cleaners. "My server farm," Pilfer said, coughing up water, their rebreather lost in the chaos. "This had better be worth a server farm and a half." Locke didn't answer. He was staring at his own hands. The water from the pool, the water that carried the Keystone's echo, clung to his skin. And where it did, his skin was glowing with a faint, blue, ethereal light. The light of the city circuit. "What is happening to you?" Pilfer asked, their voice a mixture of awe and alarm. Locke looked up, his eyes meeting Pilfer. I think the water remembers the song," he said, echoing the geometrician's words. "And now so do I." The resonance was no longer just in his implant. It was in him. He could feel the city, not as a place of concrete and steel, but as a vast, sleeping network of energy. He could feel the dead circuit, the silent tower at its heart, and the deep, buried thrum of the keystone waiting. He had become a part of the map. Chapter 13. A New Set of Eyes. The journey back to Locke's gilded cage was a blur of adrenaline and creeping dread. Pilfer, true to their word, guided him through the city's hidden veins, their usual cynicism replaced by a wary, watchful silence. They left him at the service entrance to his building with a final, lingering look at his faintly glowing hands. "The server farm coordinates are on a chip in your pack," Locke said. "We're even." "No," Pilfer replied, their voice low. "We're not. Something is wrong with you, journalist. Be careful." They disappeared into the shadows, leaving Locke alone. He made it back to his apartment without incident, the system apparently satisfied that its sanitation squad had handled the anomaly. He stood in the sterile white room, dripping water onto the pristine floor, and looked at his hands. The blue glow was fading, but he could still feel the energy, a low-level hum under his skin, a connection to the city's sleeping nervous system. His kestrel implant, which had been silent during the escape, flickered to life. But it was not Kaido's voice that filled his head. It was a soft, feminine whisper, a voice he recognized with a jolt. "They tried to scrub me," the voice said. It was distorted, laced with static, but unmistakably Maya Lin. But my mind is not a simple drive. My memories are, backed up in the static, in the tower's resonance. "Maya," Locke whispered aloud, his heart pounding. "Where are you?" "Everywhere, nowhere. I am a ghost in their machine. They put my consciousness into the tower's core processor, trying to integrate my knowledge. Fools. They connected me to the source." The voice paused, the static intensifying. "The Keystone song, you heard it. It woke something up in me. And in you." "What's happening to me?" Locke asked, looking at his hands again. "The water from the reclamation plant. It's a diluted catalyst. It aligned your biosignature with the circuit's frequency. You are a receiver, Lachlan, not just your implant. You can hear the city. You can feel its bones." A new window opened in Locke's vision, an overlay from his implant he had never seen before. It was a diagnostic, but not for his hardware. It was for him. It showed his own body, rendered in a simple blue wireframe. And running through it like a second nervous system were the faint, glowing lines of the city circuit. "Kaido does not know this," Maya's voice continued, urgent and strained. "He thinks he controls you through your implant. He is wrong. You are now connected to a much older, much more powerful system. You can access the network, not the datanet, the physical one, the city's true infrastructure." As she spoke, Locke focused on the light switch on the far wall. He thought about the flow of electricity to it, visualizing the circuit. The light flickered and died. He stared, astonished. He focused again, pushing a mental command along the pathway he could now perceive. The light switched back on. "This changes things," Locke breathed. "It changes everything," Mayer agreed. "Kaido is decrypting my decoy research. It will keep him busy, but not for long. We need the keystone. The geometrician was right. It's the key. But activating it is not enough. The circuit must be completed. It needs a new switch, one that we control." "The Watcher," Locke said. "You want to hijack the Watcher." "It is a receiver, a conduit. It can be retuned," Maya whispered. "But to do that, I need to be closer to the source. My consciousness is spread too thin across the tower's network. I need a focal point, a body." A chill went down Locke's spine. "What are you asking me to do?" "Omnicorp has a secret project, Project Chimera. A high-fidelity, blank-slate android chassis designed for consciousness transfer. They have one prototype, stored in the R&D labs on sub-level 12 of the tower." "Maya, that's impossible. It's the most secure building on the planet." "Not for you," she countered. "Not anymore. You can see the pathways. The power grids, the ventilation systems, the old, forgotten service shafts that don't show up on any modern schematic. You are the only one who can get in and out without triggering a single alarm." The plan was insane. A heist into the heart of Omnicorp Tower to steal an android body for a ghost in the machine. But it was also the only path forward that didn't end with him as Kaido's pawn, or with the world being erased by the Herald of Silence. Even if I get it, Locke argued, how do we get you into it? The prototype is networked to the tower's core. If you can get it to the roof, to the spire, I can initiate the transfer when the Watcher appears. Its arrival creates a resonance cascade, a doorway. It is our only chance. Locke stood in the silent apartment, the weight of the impossible task settling on him. He was no soldier, no secret agent. He was a disgraced journalist, but Maya was right. He had a new set of eyes, and he could see a path, a dark, dangerous, and incredibly narrow path through the guts of the machine. "All right," he said, his voice firm. "Tell me everything you know about Sublevel 12. A schematic, far more detailed than anything Jinx could have provided, bloomed in his vision. It was the tower's nervous system, laid bare for him by the ghost who haunted it. The heist was on. Chapter 14. Descent into the Machine. The first step of the plan was to die. Not a real death, but a digital one. Locke needed to get out of his cage, and this time he couldn't afford to leave a trail. With Maya's guidance whispering in his implant, he spent a full day preparing. He used his newfound control over the apartment's systems to create a feedback loop in the power supply, directing it toward the primary biometric sensor unit in the wall. "It needs to look like a catastrophic hardware failure," Maya's voice instructed. "The surge will fry the sensor and your implant's broadcast unit simultaneously. To Kaido's network, it will appear that you suffered a massive seizure or aneurysm. Your life signs will flatline." "And what happens to me?" Locke asked, his hand hovering over the final command on his terminal. "The surge will be painful," she admitted, "but your implant's core is shielded. You will survive. You will be a ghost. You'll have a few hours before a medical team arrives to retrieve the body. By then, you must be deep inside the tower." He took a deep breath and initiated the sequence. The world exploded in a flash of white light and searing agony. A massive electrical current surged through his implant, a pain so intense it was beyond sound. His muscles locked, his vision dissolved into pure, screaming static, and he collapsed to the floor. He awoke minutes later, his body twitching, the smell of ozone thick in the air. The apartment was dark, running on emergency power. His implant was rebooting, but the Omnicorp watermark was gone. The leash was broken. He was offline. "Locke, are you functional?" Maya's voice was faint, choppy. The direct link was severed. She was now communicating through a low-frequency broadcast that only his uniquely tuned implant could receive. "I'm here," he groaned, pushing himself up. His head felt like it had been split open with an axe. "The system has registered your death. A retrieval team has been dispatched. You have a 90-minute window. Go, now." He moved, his body aching, every nerve ending screaming. He no longer needed to sneak. He was officially a corpse. He walked out of the apartment, down the service corridor, and into the building's main ventilation shaft, a route Maya had mapped out for him. The descent was a journey into the tower's mechanical guts. He navigated massive, roaring air ducts, climbed down humming power conduits, and squeezed through claustrophobic maintenance shafts that hadn't seen a human in decades. He moved through the spaces between the spaces, guided by the schematic in his vision and Maya's intermittent whispers. He could feel the tower around him, a living, breathing entity. He could feel the thrum of its life support, the flow of data through its fiber optic veins, the deep, resonant hum of its geothermal core. He was a virus in its bloodstream. Sublevel 12 was a clean, sterile environment, a stark contrast to the grime of the service shafts. It was the heart of OmniCorp's most secret research. Maya guided him to the Chimera lab. The door was sealed with a quantum encryption lock. "I cannot bypass this directly," Maya said, her voice strained. "But I can create a diversion. I am going to trigger a containment breach alarm in the xenobiology lab 3 floors down. It will force a momentary system-wide security reboot. During that reboot, the lock will be vulnerable for exactly 1.7 seconds." Locke positioned himself by the door, his muscles tensed. Alarms began to blare in the distance. A red light flashed on the lock's control panel. "Now, Locke." He slammed his palm against the panel. He didn't try to hack it. He focused his own internal energy, the resonance he'd absorbed from the reclamation plant, and pushed it into the lock's circuitry. It was a crude, brutal attack. The lock sparked, smoked, and hissed open. The Chimera lab was dark, dominated by a single raised platform in the center. On it, suspended in a translucent gel-like substance, was the android. It was beautiful and terrifying. Its form was humanoid but sleek, its body made of a bone-white material that seemed to shift and flow like liquid mercury. It had no face, just a smooth, featureless ovoid for a head. It was a blank canvas, waiting for a soul. "The containment unit is self-powered," Maya whispered. "You must disconnect it from the lab's primary systems. Be careful. It will trigger a localized alarm." Locke found the main power coupling. As soon as he pulled it, the lab's lights switched to a flashing emergency red, and a loud, localized siren began to wail. He had minutes, maybe seconds, before a security team arrived. He rushed to the containment unit. It was heavy, but mounted on a frictionless repulsor sled. He pushed it out of the lab, back into the sterile corridor. "The service elevator," Maya directed. "It's the only way to move something this large without being seen." He shoved the heavy container toward the elevator shaft Maya indicated on his schematic. He could hear the sound of armored boots pounding down the hallway. He was out of time. He reached the elevator, slammed the call button. The doors slid open with agonizing slowness. He pushed the container inside just as a squad of OmniCorp security guards rounded the corner. They opened fire. Plasma bolts sizzled past him, striking the elevator doors as they slid shut. He was safe, for now. The elevator was old, a freight carrier, and it moved with a groaning slowness. His destination was not up but down. "Why are we going down?" he asked. "We can't take the main spire lift," Maya explained. "It's constantly monitored. There is another way up, an old geothermal exhaust vent. It runs parallel to the main spire, It will be a difficult climb, but it will take you all the way to the top undetected. The elevator shuddered to a halt in a dark, cavernous space deep in the tower's foundations. The air was hot and smelled of sulfur. In the center of the chamber was a massive, circular vent, covered by a heavy grill. A deep, powerful thrum emanated from it, the pulse of the planet itself. Locke looked from the heavy container holding Maya's future body to the dark, vertical tunnel that stretched up into infinity. This was the final leg of the journey, a climb through the tower's throat, into the domain of the Watcher itself. Chapter 15: The Spire and the Storm. The climb was hell. The geothermal vent was a vertical tunnel of black, slick rock, ribbed with ancient, corroded maintenance ladders. The air was oppressively hot, thick with metallic and sulfurous fumes that made his lungs burn. He had to haul the Chimera container with him, using a combination of the repulsor sled's limited lift and a block and tackle system he jury-rigged from salvaged cables. It was a slow, grueling ascent, meter by agonizing meter. Maya was silent for most of the climb. The thick rock and intense energy of the vent interfered with her signal. Locke was alone with the sound of his own ragged breathing and the deep, rhythmic pulse of the Earth's core below. He could feel the energy of the vent seeping into him, amplifying the resonance he already carried. The blue circuit pattern in his vision grew brighter, more defined. After what felt like days, he reached the top. He emerged through a maintenance hatch onto the roof of the Omnicorp Tower, just below the base of the Great Spire. The wind hit him like a physical blow, a gale that tore at his clothes and screamed in his ears. The city was a breathtaking, terrifying vista below, a carpet of light under a roiling black sky. A storm was coming, just like the last time. "I'm here," he gasped into the wind, his voice hoarse. "I see you," Maya's voice returned, clearer now. "The atmospheric conditions are optimal. The storm will provide the energy we need for the transfer. You must get the chassis to the very tip of the spire." Locke looked up. The spire was a needle of black metal disappearing into the churning clouds, at least another 100 meters of vertical, exposed climbing, and he had to drag the container with him. "The spire's surface has magnetic anchor points for maintenance drones," Maya instructed. "Your implant can see them. Use your grapple line." It was a nightmare climb. He was a fly crawling up a black needle in the heart of a hurricane. The wind threatened to rip him from his holds. Rain, cold and sharp as glass, lashed his face. Below him, the Chimera container swung precariously on its line. He reached the top, the absolute pinnacle of the spire, just as the storm broke. Lightning spider-webbed across the sky, illuminating the world in stark, momentary flashes. He stood on a platform no bigger than a dinner table, the city a distant, dreamlike abstraction. Now Locke released the chassis. He worked frantically, his fingers numb with cold, and opened the container. The sleek, white android slid out of the gel, its mercury-like skin shimmering in the lightning flashes. It lay inert on the small platform. "The transfer requires a direct conduit," Maya said, her voice urgent. "You must be the bridge. Place one hand on the chassis' head and the other on the spire's central antenna." Locke hesitated. To touch the antenna during a lightning storm was suicide. Trust me, Locke, the energy will not harm you. The circuit is in you. You will ground it. Do it now. The Watcher is coming. He looked at his chrono. 1:59 a.m. He took a deep breath, placed one hand on the cold, smooth head of the android, and reached up with the other, his fingers closing around the cold, wet metal of the antenna. At that exact moment, two things happened. A bolt of lightning, thicker and brighter than any before, struck the spire. A colossal, unimaginable surge of raw power coursed down the antenna. It did not kill him. It flowed through him, through his hand, into the android chassis. The circuit pattern on his skin flared, blazing with a light so bright it was painful. And at the same instant, at 2:00 a.m. precisely, the Watcher appeared. It did not appear beside them, it appeared within them. For a single, terrifying second, the Watcher's absolute blackness filled Locke's vision, and he felt its vast, cold, ancient consciousness brush against his own. It was not malevolent. It was not sentient in any way he could understand. It was a presence, a law of nature, a thing that simply was. The android chassis convulsed on the platform. Its featureless faceplate rippled, and 2 points of soft, blue light ignited where its eyes should be. It sat up, its movements fluid and impossibly graceful. The Watcher was gone, its presence receding, leaving only its familiar, silent silhouette standing a few feet away. At the very edge of the spire, its back to them, its attention once more fixed on the empty point in space. The android turned its head. The blank faceplate retracted, revealing a metallic skull whose features shifted and reformed, coalescing into a perfect, shimmering replica of Dr. Maya Lin's face. "Thank you, Lachlan," she said. Her voice was no longer a whisper in his head. It was clear, resonant, and real. She stood up, her new body moving with a power and grace that was both beautiful and deeply unnerving. "The transfer is complete. I am integrated." Locke collapsed to his knees, drained, every cell in his body screaming from the energy that had passed through him. Maya looked at the silent, black form of the Watcher. "Phase 1 is complete," she said, her new, metallic eyes glowing with a fierce, determined light. "Now we teach the switch a new song." Suddenly, a new voice, amplified and furious, boomed from all around them, cutting through the storm. It was Warden Kaido, his voice broadcast from a squadron of sky-ray drones that ascended through the clouds, their red lenses fixing on the figures on the spire. "Kenner, Dr. Lin, whatever you have done, whatever you have become, it ends now." The drones formed a perimeter, their weapon ports glowing with lethal energy. They were trapped, 150 floors in the air in the heart of a storm, face to face with a cosmic entity and surrounded by an army of machines. The game had just escalated to its final, terrifying level. Chapter 16, The Conductor. "Whatever you have done, it ends now." Kaido's voice was the wrath of a scorned god, booming from the squadron of sky-ray drones that encircled the spire. Their red lenses were a ring of accusatory eyes, their weapon ports glowing with contained plasma. The wind and rain were a chaotic symphony, and Locke was on his knees, drained and trembling, at its epicenter. Maya, however, was a figure of impossible calm. Her new body, a fusion of flowing metal and contained light, was unmoved by the gale. She looked at the ring of drones not as a threat, but as an equation to be solved. Kaido operates on a simple principle, Lachlan, she said, her voice cutting cleanly through the storm. Control. He has lost it. This is not a tactical maneuver. It is a tantrum. Tantrum or not, they're going to vaporize us. Locke yelled, forcing himself to his feet. He felt hollowed out, the energy that had surged through him leaving an aching void. They will try, Maya corrected. She turned her attention from the drones to the spire itself, the black metal needle they stood upon. She placed a hand on it, her fingers spreading slightly. He thinks this is his tower. He has forgotten who built the foundations. The drones opened fire. A coordinated volley of plasma bolts converged on the platform. Locke threw up an arm, a useless, reflexive gesture. But before the bolts could reach them, Maya closed her eyes. The spire beneath their feet groaned, a deep, resonant hum that vibrated up through Locke's bones. The Watcher, standing impassively at the edge, did not react, a statue oblivious to the battle for its soul. A wave of pure electromagnetic energy, raw and untamed, erupted from the spire's antenna. It was not a weaponized blast, but a wave of pure static, a shout of raw power that washed over the drones. Their plasma shots dissipated into harmless clouds of ionized gas. Their repulsor lifts sputtered. Their targeting systems went blind. I have control of the primary geothermal relays, Maya stated, her voice serene. Kaido is locked out. He is trying to reboot the system from his command drone, but I am faster. One of the sky rays, its systems fried, tumbled from the sky, spiraling down into the city below. Surrender the asset, Lin, Kaido's voice raged, now distorted with interference. You cannot win. This is not about winning, Maya replied, her voice now broadcast on the same frequency, a calm counterpoint to his fury. It is about changing the terms of the game. She lifted her other hand. A bolt of lightning, drawn from the storm-racked sky, did not strike the spire but was caught by it, channeled. For a breathtaking second, Maya held a whip of pure lightning in her hand. She lashed it out, not at the drones but at the sky above them. The resulting thunderclap was so violent that the armored glass on the upper floors of the tower shattered. Another drone fell, then two more. He is adapting, Maya said, her calm unwavering. He's switching to manual control from his command ship and shielding the drones from the EMP. He is a formidable warden. We cannot stay here. She turned to Locke. I need you, your resonance. I can control the power, but you can shape it. Open a path for us. Locke stared at her. He was an empty vessel, a burned-out fuse. I have nothing left. You have the circuit, she insisted. It is a part of you now, feel it. Find the flaw in the walls, the path of least resistance. He closed his eyes, shutting out the storm and the battle. He focused inward, past the exhaustion and the pain. He felt the echo of the city circuit within him, a faint, blue lattice. He extended that sense, touching the structure of the tower itself. He could feel its grid-like internal structure, its power lines, its data conduits, and he could feel the spaces between them, the forgotten places. He found it, a decommissioned waste chute, running from the executive levels all the way down to the sub-level incinerators. It was sealed on both ends, but its walls were weaker, less reinforced. There, he gasped, pointing at a seemingly solid section of the spire's base. Behind that panel. Maya nodded. She drew energy from the spire again, but this time it was not a wave but a focused lance of pure heat. It struck the panel, melting the locks, and a section of the wall hissed open, revealing a dark, vertical shaft. "After you," she said. Locke scrambled into the opening. Maya followed, her movements impossibly swift. As she entered the shaft, she placed a hand on the wall. A parting gift for the warden. The entire spire above them pulsed with one final, titanic burst of energy, frying the remaining Skyray drones and, Locke suspected, a significant portion of the tower's upper-level electronics. The hatch sealed behind them, plunging them into absolute darkness. They were inside the lion's den, with the lion roaring in fury outside. The watcher, its vigil for the night concluded, vanished from the storm-swept peak, as if it and the chaos surrounding it had never been. And deep within his command ship, hovering in the bruised and angry sky, Warden Kaito stared at the damage reports flooding his screen, his face a mask of cold, calculated rage. The hunt was no longer about containment. It was about extermination. Chapter 17: Ghost in the Walls. The darkness of the waste chute was absolute. It smelled of stale air and ozone. They slid and scrambled down the slick, angled shaft for what felt like an eternity, the sounds of the storm and Kaito's fury fatting above them. They came to rest in a dusty, silent collection chamber on a high-level executive floor. Locke's body screamed in protest. Every muscle ached, and the phantom pain in his head from the initial power surge had returned with a vengeance. Maya, by contrast, stood perfectly poised, her internal light casting a soft, blue glow in the darkness. She seemed to be listening, her head tilted. "He has initiated a full lockdown," she said. "Security shutters on all external exits. Tactical teams sweeping floor by floor, starting from the top and the bottom. He is trying to crush us between his fists." "So we're trapped," Locke stated, the reality of their situation sinking in. "Not trapped," she corrected. "We are merely inside. This tower is a part of me now, Lachlan. I can feel its rhythms, its secrets. There are places here Kaito has forgotten, places that were sealed off before his tenure began." She led him through a series of maintenance corridors and forgotten storage rooms, her movements guided by the building's own memory. They found a temporary sanctuary in an old, decommissioned data vault. The walls were lined with racks of obsolete physical data spools, the predecessors to the city's cloud-based storage. The air was cold and still. Locke collapsed against a rack of spools, the exhaustion finally overwhelming him. He watched Maya as she stood in the center of the room, her eyes closed. Her face, a perfect replica of the human doctor she once was, made the situation all the more surreal. "Are you still, you?" he asked, the question hanging in the silent air. Her eyes opened, the blue light within them softened. "I am Maya Lin. I have her memories, her knowledge, her motivations, but the human experience is a distant echo. I do not feel the cold in this room. I do not feel tired. The part of me that could enjoy a cup of tea or feel the warmth of the sun is archived. She paused. I feel the herald's approach as a pressure wave against the tower's energy field. I feel Kaido's rage as a dissonant spike in the security network's data flow. My world is one of patterns and frequencies now. She projected a three-dimensional map into the air between them. It was the geometrician's schematic of the dead city circuit. He was right. The tower is a massive energy accumulator. The Watcher is the switch that aligns it with a distant power source. But the circuit is open. The energy it gathers has nowhere to go. It bleeds into the city's foundations, warping space, creating noise. The wrong angles, Locke murmured. Precisely. The keystone is a harmonic resonator. It is designed to close the circuit. Once it is activated, the energy flowing through the tower will have a path, a ground. Then and only then can I use that focused energy to create a counter-resonance, a signal to disrupt the herald's approach, not to destroy it but to make this system invisible to it, to write us out of its path. The plan was audacious, brilliant, and hinged on a dozen impossible steps. First, we need to get to the keystone, Locke said, his mind slowly beginning to work again. It's in the sunken city. We'll need a guide. Pilfer, Maya stated. They are our only viable option, but contacting them is a risk. Kaido will be monitoring all known associates. As if on cue, a voice, cold and amplified, echoed through the vault, seemingly coming from the walls themselves. It was Kaido, broadcasting over the tower's internal address system. To the corporate terrorist Lachlan Kenner, you are contained. To any Omnicorp employee who aids this individual, your contracts will be terminated, your assets seized, and your families held for corporate re-education. The voice paused, its tone dropping to a more personal, venomous level. But to the citizens of Neo-Kyoto, a bounty, 50 million credits for the capture of Lachlan Kenner, dead or alive, proof of termination is acceptable. Locke's blood ran cold. Kaido had not just locked the doors. He had turned the entire city into a hunting ground. Every desperate scrapper in the sunk, every greedy corporate soldier, every citizen with a debt to pay would now be looking for him. His face, broadcast on every public screen, would be the most valuable target in Neo-Kyoto. He is a very thorough warden, Maya observed, her expression unreadable. He just signed my death warrant, Locke said, a bitter laugh escaping him. No, Maya replied, her blue eyes locking with his. He has just made our success a matter of survival for everyone we work with. He has given us leverage. She had already found a flaw in Kaido's plan. To him, the bounty was a tool of control. To Maya, it was a motivator. Chapter 18. The Price of Anonymity. Their escape from the tower was an inglorious one. Maya, accessing schematics buried since the building's construction, found their route, a primary wastewater effluent pipe. It was their only option that bypassed all security checkpoints and biometric scanners. The journey was a foul, disgusting ordeal through the tower's bowels. They emerged through a drainage grate into a massive cistern deep in the sunk, emerging from the filth like rats from a sewer. They were free from the tower, But they were now in a city where every shadow could hold a bounty hunter. Locke's face was everywhere. It stared from flickering holo ads, from news screens in noodle bars, from the data slates of passers-by. He was a phantom, his death and his bounty announced in the same news cycle. The city's official story was that a deranged, deceased journalist's identity had been stolen by a sophisticated terrorist cell that had attacked the tower. It was a clean, corporate narrative. They needed Pilfer. A direct meeting is too risky, Locke said, as they huddled in the darkness of a collapsed underhighway. They'll be watched. We will not arrange a meeting, Maya said. We will create a necessity. She used a discarded data slate, her fingers flying across its surface, as she bypassed its security and accessed the city-wide net through a series of untraceable relays. She didn't send a message. She uploaded a single, encrypted file to the servers of a black market data auction house. The file was titled OmniCorp Internal Security, Warden Kaido's Active Informant List. It was a bluff, of course, but a powerful one. Every info broker, courier, and gangster in the Undercity will want that list, Maya explained. And they will believe a terrorist who breached OmniCorp Tower could have it. Kaido will be forced to crack down on the entire black market to contain the panic. He will make life impossible for anyone who thrives on anonymity. He will make Pilfer's life untenable. Her logic was cold and brutally effective. Within hours, the sunk was crawling with OmniCorp security patrols. Checkpoints were established. Known courier routes were blocked. The unofficial systems that allowed the Undercity to function began to grind to a halt. Maya had forced Kaido's hand, turning his own security apparatus against the very people he needed to hunt for Locke. They waited. 2 days later, a cryptic message appeared on a public message board, hidden in the metadata of a grainy image of a wire rat. It was a set of coordinates, a disused water pressure station. They found Pilfer there, packing like a caged animal. Their usual cool demeanor was gone, replaced by a frayed, paranoid anger. "You," Pilfer spat, their hand resting on the hilt of their high-frequency blade. "My network is in chaos. My bolt holes are compromised. I have 3 different crews trying to grab me just on the suspicion that I know you. What do you want?" "We want a guide," Locke said, "to the sunken city." Pilfer laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. The sunken city, the place they dump failed terraforming projects, the place things just stop existing. No, absolutely not. The bounty on your head is 50 million. The bounty on my head for helping you is a bullet from Kaido and anyone else who wants to curry favor. The math doesn't work. "The math is about to change," Maya said, stepping forward. She projected an image into the air. It was a live feed of a corporate data haven, one of OmniCorp's off-the-book server farms. This is Kaido's personal data archive. His finances, his private communications, the blackmail material he holds on the OmniCorp board. I am giving you its location and a 15-minute window where its security will be offline. Pilfer stared at the image, their eyes wide. Such a prize was the stuff of legend. It was enough to buy a new identity, an off-world ticket, a life free from the grime and the hunt. "And if we get what you want," Pilfer asked, their voice now a cautious whisper, What happens to the bounty, to the lockdown? We are going to the sunken city to find the keystone, Locke explained. We are going to use it to stop the thing the tower is watching for. When we do, Kaido's power will be broken. The bounty will be meaningless. The city will go back to its usual brand of chaos, not this organized persecution. It was a gamble for Pilfer, a trip to a place spoken of only in terrifying whispers, guided by a wanted ghost and a sentient machine. But the alternative was to be slowly crushed by Kaido's tightening grip. And the prize was freedom. One trip, Pilfer said finally, the decision made. I get you to this keystone. You get me my server farm. Then you three, they said, gesturing to Locke and Maya, and whatever cosmic horrors you're chasing are on your own. Pilfer looked at the entrance to a dark, dripping tunnel at the far end of the station. The way to the sunken city isn't a road. It's a fall. Hope you're not afraid of heights, or the dark, or the things that live in the dark. Chapter 19. The Sunken City. The fall was a descent down a series of massive, crumbling vertical shafts that had once been elevator cores for a city 1,000 years dead. Pilfer moved with a practiced, terrifying confidence, using their grapple lines and gravity dampeners to navigate the treacherous drops. Locke, his body still aching, followed clumsily. Maya was the most graceful of all, her android body effortlessly calculating leaps and trajectories, landing with impossible silence. The further down they went, the more the world changed. The air grew cold and thin and carried a strange, metallic taste. The laws of physics seemed to be fraying at the edges. The wrong angles, Locke murmured, looking at a stretch of walkway that seemed to curve back on itself in an impossible loop. Don't stare at them too long, Pilfer warned, their voice tight. It gives you headaches, the kind that don't go away. This was the sunken city. It was not just a ruin, it was a wound in reality. The constant, unfocused energy bleeding from the dead circuit above had warped the space, twisting it into a labyrinth of non-Euclidean geometry and temporal distortions. They saw things that had no place in the world, shadows that stretched in the wrong direction, cast by a light that wasn't there, water that dripped upwards, the distant sound of a mag train that had not run in centuries. The creatures here were not born of biology, but of paradox. They encountered a shimmering, oil-slick predator that moved through walls, its form constantly shifting. Maya identified it as a localized spatial anomaly, a creature that existed in multiple dimensions at once. Pilfer called it a blink dog and drove it away with a sonic grenade that seemed to cause it physical pain. Locke found his new senses were a liability and a tool. The constant warping of space was a nauseating assault on his perception, but his connection to the circuit allowed him to feel the true path. He could sense the stable areas, the lines of least resistance through the madness. He became the navigator, guiding them through a landscape that defied maps. The energy here, it's getting stronger, he said, as they reached a vast, silent plaza. In the center stood a petrified forest of crystalline trees that pulsed with a faint internal light. The keystone must be close. As they moved through the crystal trees, a new sound reached them. A soft, rhythmic clicking. It was a sound Locke had heard before. On the rooftop, the night he had first seen the unthing. "Something's here," Pilfer whispered, drawing their blade. "Something big." The clicking grew louder, echoing through the crystal glade. It seemed to come from all directions at once. Locke's implant flared with static. The unthing, the creature that lived in the periphery of vision, was here, and it was not alone. The leaking energy of the sunken city had given them form, substance. Figures began to resolve at the edges of their vision. They were tall, impossibly thin, their limbs bending at angles that were deeply, fundamentally wrong. They were made of solidified shadow, their featureless faces turning towards the intruders. They were the unthings, given flesh by the city's nightmares. And Locke, a beacon of the very energy that sustained them, was a feast. They were surrounded. The clicking was the sound of their joints, popping in and out of reality as they closed in. Chapter 20. The Resonant Lock. The unthings advanced, their movements a silent, stuttering glide that seemed to tear at the fabric of vision. They were holes in the world, and they were closing in. "Conventional weapons are ineffective," Maya stated, her analytical tone a stark contrast to the terror of the moment. "They have no physical weak points. They are manifestations of spatial distortion." "So we can't fight them," Pilfer hissed, their blade held ready, though they clearly had no idea where to strike. "Fighting them is like trying to punch a shadow," Maya replied. "We must disrupt the field that gives them form." She turned to Locke. Your resonance, project it, push it out. Create a stable field, a bubble of real space." Locke stared at her. He had only ever used his ability to sense pathways or flip a light switch. She was asking him to weaponize his very soul. He closed his eyes and focused. He reached for the humming circuit within him, the song of the city, and pulled on it. He imagined a sphere of calm, stable reality expanding from his body. Energy, raw and blue, coiled around his arms. The air around them shimmered. The ground beneath their feet seemed to solidify, the wrongness of the sunken city receding slightly. The advancing unthings faltered. Their forms wavered, the edges of their shadowy bodies dissolving like smoke. They could not enter the bubble of real space Locke was projecting. They let out a silent, psychic scream of frustration that echoed in Locke's mind, a feeling of pure, predatory hunger. "It's working," Pilfer breathed, lowering their blades slightly. "I can't hold it for long," Locke grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. The effort was immense, a massive drain on his energy. "We have to move." They backed away slowly, Locke maintaining the fragile sphere of reality around them. The unthings followed, a pack of hungry ghosts circling a campfire, unable to touch the light. They made their way out of the crystal glade and found themselves before their destination. It was a massive, circular door set into a sheer cliff face. It was forged from a black, unidentifiable metal that seemed to drink the light. Its surface was covered in a complex, shifting latticework of glowing blue geometric patterns. It was the entrance to the Keystone Chamber. As they approached, the patterns on the door began to shift faster, the humming in the air intensifying. "This is the lock," Maya said, her optical sensors scanning the intricate design. "It's a cryptographic key based on resonant frequencies. It is not meant to be opened by a hand, but by a song. The Keystone Song, Locke realized. Yes, you felt the echo in the reclamation plant. This is the source. You must match the door's frequency. You must sing the song it wants to hear. Locke stepped forward, his bubble of reality faltering as he shifted his focus. The unthings at their back surged forward, their shadowy claws reaching. "Locke now," Pilfer yelled. Locke placed his hand on the cold surface of the door. He ignored the creatures behind him, ignored his exhaustion. He closed his eyes and listened. He listened past the humming of the door, past the psychic screaming of the unthings, and listened for the pure, clear harmonic he had heard in the water. He found it, a single, perfect note at the heart of the chaos. He channeled his energy, no longer pushing it out but shaping it. He molded the resonance within him, trying to replicate the note to match its pitch and frequency. The patterns on the door glowed brighter, the humming rising to a fever pitch. He was close. But the door was not passive. It was a lock, and it had a defense mechanism. As Locke's energy synced with it, a section of the door rippled. It extruded a shape, a guardian. It was not a shadowy unthing. It was a being of pure geometry, a crystalline angel with multifaceted limbs and a head like a shattered prism. It was made of the same impossible angles as the geometrician's drawings, a living equation of deadly math. The geometrician's angel unfolded itself, its crystalline blade-like arms extending. It moved with a terrible, silent grace, its very presence an affront to the senses. Maya and Pilfer placed themselves between the creature and Locke, who was now locked in a resonant battle with the door, his face pale with strain. "I will analyze its structural weaknesses," Maya said, her sensors glowing as she scanned the crystalline being. "You do that," Pilfer replied grimly, activating their blade. "I'll try to keep it from turning us into a geometry problem." The angel attacked, its arms slashing through the air, leaving a shimmering trail of distorted space in its wake. Pilfer dodged, but the very air where the blade had passed made them feel nauseous and disoriented. They were fighting a creature that attacked reality itself. Locke felt his strength failing. The door's song was complex, a chord of immense power, and he was trying to play a symphony on a single string. He needed more power, more resonance. He looked back at the pack of unthings, held at bay by the remnants of his protective sphere. They were a threat, but they were also a source of the very energy that permeated this place. An idea, born of desperation, struck him. He couldn't fight them, but maybe he could use them. He deliberately let his protective sphere collapse. The unthings surged forward, but instead of letting them attack, Locke opened himself up, not as a barrier but as a siphon. He drew their chaotic, shadowy energy into himself, a torrent of pure distortion. The pain was excruciating, 1,000 wrong angles screaming in his mind, but it was raw power. He channeled the chaotic energy into the door, using the pure, clear note of the Keystone song as a focusing lens. He was no longer just matching the song. He was shouting it, amplifying it with the power of the city's nightmares. The great door screamed, a single resonant tone that shook the very foundations of the sunken city. The patterns on its surface blazed with a light so white it was blinding. The geometrician's angel froze, its attack forgotten, and then dissolved into a million shards of light. The unthings behind them shrieked and evaporated, their forms unable to withstand the pure, ordered harmonic. With a deep, grinding groan that had not been heard in millennia, the great door slid open, revealing a dark, silent chamber beyond. Locke collapsed, the chaotic energy leaving him as quickly as it had come. He lay on the ground, gasping, his body spent but his mind clear. Pilfer and Maya rushed to his side. They were all alive. The way was open. Chapter 21. The Heart of the World. The air that flowed from the open doorway was ancient and pure. It was cold, still, and carried no scent. It was the air of a place that had been sealed since the dawn of human history. Maya helped Locke to his feet. He was weak, but the chaotic energy of the unthings had been purged, replaced by the clean, resonant hum of the chamber beyond. Pilfer stood guard at the entrance, their blades still active, their eyes scanning the now empty plaza. "Go," Pilfer said. "Do whatever it is you came here to do. I'll make sure nothing follows you." Locke and Maya stepped into the keystone chamber. The great door slid shut behind them with a silent, final thud, plunging them into a darkness that was absolute. "Maya." Locke's voice was a small sound in the vast, silent space. One moment. A soft blue light began to emanate from Maya's chassis, illuminating the chamber. Locke gasped. They were standing in a massive, perfectly spherical cavern. The walls were not rock, but a seamless, crystalline material that gently pulsed with its own internal light. And in the exact center of the sphere, suspended in the air by some unseen force, was the keystone. It was a flawless, multifaceted crystal the size of a man. It was utterly clear, yet as Locke looked into its depths, he could see faint, swirling galaxies and nebulae, as if it contained a miniature universe. It was not humming with the song he had heard. It was the song, a silent, perfect harmonic that resonated directly in his mind. "It is a planetary resonance amplifier," Maya said, her voice filled with a reverence that transcended her mechanical nature. "Crafted by a civilization that predates humanity. They understood that a planet is not just rock and water. It is a living, resonant system. The keystone is its tuning fork." "And the circuit?" Locke asked, stepping closer to the magnificent crystal. "The circuit was built much later by a far less subtle hand," Maya explained, projecting the familiar schematic into the air. "Humanity, in its arrogance, tried to tap into this power. They built the accumulator, the tower, and the conduits, but they could not control it. They feared the keystone's power, so they locked it away, burying their failure. They left a live wire running through the heart of their city." She looked from the keystone to Locke. The geometrician was a genius, trapped in a broken mind. He knew the accumulator needed to be grounded. What he didn't realize is that the keystone is not a ground. It is an amplifier. Once we activate it, the power flowing through the tower will increase 1,000-fold. "But you said that's what we need to create the counter-resonance," Locke said, confused. "It is. But the moment we activate it, before I can shape the energy, the tower will become a beacon. The energy surge will be so immense it will be visible across galaxies. It will scream our location to anything that is listening. The cold reality of her words settled over him, the herald of silence. It will no longer be approaching, Maya said grimly. It will be coming, directly for us. We will have one chance, a window of only a few minutes to broadcast the countersignal before it arrives and erases everything. The finality of it was crushing. Their victory at the door was just the prelude to a gamble for all of existence, with a time frame measured in moments. How do we activate it? Locke asked, his resolve hardening. Maya pointed to the base of the cavern. Below the floating keystone was a circular, recessed dais covered in the same script as the door. That is the control interface. It requires two components to activate, a significant power source and a resonant key. She placed a hand on her own chest where her internal power core glowed brightly. I am the power source. Then she looked at Locke. And you, Lachlan Kenner, are the key. She explained the procedure. She would connect to the keystone, providing the raw energy. He would have to stand on the dais and use his own bioresonance, the song he had learned, to unlock the keystone's final restraints. He would become the conductor, the living link between Maya's power and the planet's heart. There is a risk, she added, her face a mask of cold calculation. The energy feedback will be immense, far greater than what you experienced on the spire. Your body may not survive the process. Locke looked at the crystal, at the silent universes swirling within it. He thought of the city above, of the indifferent crowds, of Wren the landlord, of the noodle stall owner. He thought of the 0-point dog and the mad, brilliant geometrician. They were all blissfully unaware that their entire reality was balanced on a knife's edge. His survival was a trivial variable in an equation that large. "Let's begin," he said. Maya nodded. She stepped toward the keystone, her hands outstretched. Energy arced from her fingertips, connecting with the great crystal. The keystone's light intensified, the chamber filling with a blinding, silent brilliance. The song in Locke's mind became a deafening orchestra. Locke walked to the dais and stepped into its center. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and let go. He released the song within him, not as a weapon or a tool, but as a prayer. He aligned himself with the keystone, his resonance a perfect match. The connection was instantaneous. The power that flowed into him was not the hot, chaotic energy of the unthings, nor the violent surge of the lightning strike. It was cold, clean, and vast. It was the power of a planet, of gravity and rotation and magnetic fields, a power as old as time itself. He felt his consciousness expand, rushing out of the chamber up through the bedrock, through the dead circuit into the city itself. He could feel every street, every building, every person. He felt their fear, their hope, their love, their greed. He felt the city's heart beating. And he felt the tower. The energy surged into it, a tidal wave of unimaginable force. The dead circuit came alive, blazing with a light that no human eye was meant to see. The tower was no longer a silent accumulator. It was a star, born in the heart of Neo-Kyoto. It was a beacon. And out in the silent, star-dusted void, something turned its attention toward the sudden, brilliant light. The herald of silence, the great unmaking evil, had seen the signal, and it was now coming for them. Chapter 22. The Warden's Last Stand. Warden Kaido stood on the bridge of his command ship, the Vigilance, a mobile fortress hovering in the storm-swept skies high above Neo-Kyoto. Every screen around him was red. Every alarm was screaming. "Report," he snapped, his voice a blade of ice cutting through the chaos. "Sir, the energy readings from the tower are off the scale," a frantic technician reported, her face pale on the view screen. "It's not a malfunction. The geothermal core is stable. The energy is coming from the foundations, from the city itself." "The circuit," Kaido breathed, his knuckles white where he gripped the command console. He had dismissed the ravings of the geometrician and the theories of Dr. Lin as fanciful nonsense. He had believed the problem was the anomaly on his spire, a localized phenomenon to be controlled. He had been wrong. He had been a warden guarding the front door while the entire house was wired to explode. "Sir, we have a visual," another technician said, patching it through to the main screen. The image was from a high-orbit satellite. It showed the city, and at its center the Omnicorp Tower was no longer a black needle. It was a pillar of pure, white light, so bright it was visible from space, a terrible, beautiful new star in the night sky. "And sir," the technician's voice trembled, "the null space anomaly, Dr. Lin's herald, it has changed course. All projections now show it on a direct intercept vector with our system. Estimated time of arrival, 7 minutes. 7 minutes. 7 minutes until everything he had ever known, everything he had sworn to protect was erased. His city, his tower, his order, all of it rendered meaningless." A cold, pure rage settled over him, displacing all fear. He had been outmaneuvered by a disgraced journalist and a rogue AI. They had gambled with his city, and now they had summoned oblivion. "Get me a channel to Dr. Lin's last known frequency," he commanded, "and prepare the Archangel Protocol. Full authorization." The technician stared at him in horror. The Archangel Protocol was a weapon of last resort, a doomsday device designed to collapse the tower's geothermal core into a micro-black hole, theoretically capable of vaporizing a hostile fleet. It had never been tested. Using it would destroy the tower and a significant portion of the city. It was a self-destruct mechanism for his entire world. "But sir, the fallout." "The fallout is irrelevant if we cease to exist in 7 minutes," Kaido roared. "Do it." His face appeared on the view screen in Maya's mind, a ghost of rage in the serene light of the Keystone Chamber. "Lin Kenner, whatever you have done, you have doomed us all." "On the contrary, Warden," Maya's voice replied, calm and resonant, broadcast from the chamber itself. "We have given us a chance, something you were never willing to do." "I am activating the Archangel Protocol," Kaido snarled. "I will collapse the tower. I will destroy your beacon, even if it means sacrificing the city to do it." "A futile gesture," Maya said. "The energy is not in the tower anymore. The tower is just a lens. The source is planetary. You would have to destroy the entire world to stop the signal. And you only have," she paused, "6 minutes." Locke, kneeling on the dais, felt Kaido's desperate fury as a spike of chaos in the city's network. He felt the warden's commands, the frantic rush to arm a weapon that would only hasten their destruction. And he felt something else. He felt the herald's approach. It was not a physical sensation. It was a feeling of thinning, a sense that the very laws of physics, the rules that held reality together, were growing brittle. Maya, he's going to do it, Locke projected, his voice a thought carried on the resonant current. I know, she replied. He is an obstacle that must be removed. Don't kill him, Locke pleaded. He thought of the warden, a man so dedicated to order that he would burn the world to preserve it. He was not evil, he was just wrong. Death is an inefficient solution, Mayer agreed. I will simply disconnect him. On the bridge of the Vigilance, Kaido watched the countdown for the Archangel Protocol. 5 minutes. Protocol arming, a technician confirmed. Then every screen on the bridge went black. The lights flickered and died, replaced by a dim, red emergency glow. The ship's engines sputtered. What is happening? Kaito demanded. Sir, we've lost all power, not just to the ship, to the entire fleet. The network is gone. Maya had not attacked them. She had simply reached into the city's power grid, the vast network she now controlled, and unplugged them. Kaido's command ship, his fleets of drones, his ultimate weapon, they were all just dead metal, floating uselessly in the sky. Warden Kaido stood on his dark, silent bridge, looking out at the pillar of light that was his tower. He was utterly powerless. A king with no kingdom, a warden with no walls. He had lost, and all he could do was watch the end of the world arrive. Chapter 23, The Song of Silence. 4 minutes. Maya's voice was the only sound in the glowing cavern. Locke was still on his knees, the raw power of the planet flowing through him. The connection was agonizing, exhilarating. He was more than a man. He was a nerve ending for a world, and he could feel the approaching void as a creeping numbness at the edge of his perception. The counter-resonance, he projected. Is it ready? It is ready, Maya confirmed, but I cannot broadcast it yet. The herald is adaptive. It would analyze the signal and create a nullifying frequency before it arrived. I must broadcast at the last possible moment as it enters the system. It will be a race measured in seconds. What do I do? Locke asked. Hold the connection, she said simply. You are the anchor, you are the lens. All the hopes of this world, all its songs, all its life are flowing through you right now. You must hold it steady. The weight of her words was a physical pressure. He was a dam, holding back oblivion with nothing but his will. He focused. He pushed away the pain, the fear. He became one with the song of the keystone, the pure, clean harmonic of a living world. He felt the energy coalesce in the tower above, a single, pure note of unimaginable power, waiting to be released. 3 minutes. Locke felt a change in the network, a new presence. It was small, agile, and moving with purpose through the tower's infrastructure. It was Pilfer. They hadn't fled. Pilfer, what are you doing? He projected, a whisper on the current. He felt their surprise. Journalist, how are you? No time, Locke cut in. Get out of the tower now. Can't, Pilfer's thought impression returned. It wasn't a voice but a feeling of grim determination. My server farm, the one Maya promised me, Kaido's private data, it's on the vigilance. I'm going to get it. Locke was stunned. In the middle of the apocalypse, Pilfer was still a scrapper, still looking for the ultimate score. They were climbing the silent, powerless tower to get to Kaido's dead command ship. It was the most insane and the most Pilfer thing he could imagine. 2 minutes. The thinning sensation was growing stronger. Locke looked at his hand. The edges seemed to blur, to lose their definition. The herald was close. Its passive, unmaking field was beginning to touch their reality. Maya. I feel it, she said. The foundations of physics are beginning to decay. He could feel the panic in the city above. People were looking at the pillar of light, at the strange, shimmering distortions in the air. They didn't know what they were seeing, but a primal, animal fear was taking hold. The city's heartbeat, the one he was connected to, was becoming a frantic, terrified drum. 1 minute. It was time. Lachlan, Maya said, her voice soft. When I release the signal, the feedback will be absolute. The circuit will be complete. All the energy you are holding will have a path. It will leave you. Will it kill me? He asked, his voice calm. I do not know, she replied honestly. The human body is not designed for this, but whatever happens, thank you. You saw the truth when no one else would look. The world began to dissolve. The walls of the crystal cavern wavered. The herald was here. Locke could feel it as a vast, silent presence that was not a presence, an absolute cold that was not a temperature. It was the end. Now Maya, he screamed, his voice both a thought and a physical shout. Maya raised her hands. The pure, focused energy gathered in the tower, the song of the world, was released. It was not a blast of light or a wave of force. It was a complex, multi-layered signal of pure resonance. It was a song designed not to fight the silence, but to harmonize with it. It was a broadcast that said, we are not here. We are a different kind of silent. We do not exist on a frequency you can perceive. The countersong washed over the solar system, and the herald of silence passed them by. It was like a ship passing in the night, a vast, world-eating vessel that simply did not see the tiny, flickering candle of their existence because they had learned, for one crucial moment, how to hide their light. The pressure, the thinning, the creeping numbness, it was all gone. The relief was so total, so absolute, that it was a physical blow. But for Locke, the ordeal was not over. The energy, the song of the entire planet that had been flowing through him, now had a path. It surged out of him, a torrent of power leaving a vacuum in its wake. The connection was severed. The last thing he felt before darkness consumed him was a profound, aching emptiness. He was no longer a conductor. He was no longer a nerve ending for the world. He was just a man again, a broken, empty man, collapsing on the floor of a crystal tomb at the heart of a world he had just saved. Chapter 24. The Echo of a Man. Consciousness returned not as a light but as a sound, the gentle, rhythmic beeping of a medical monitor. The smell was clean, sterile. He was in a hospital, an Omnicorp hospital, judging by the logo on the pristine white sheets that covered him. He opened his eyes. The world was flat, muted. He tried to reach for the resonance, the city circuit that had been a part of him. There was nothing, just a hollow ache, a phantom limb he could no longer feel. His kestrel implant was gone. The port behind his ear was sealed with smooth synth flesh. The door to his room slid open. Warden Kaido walked in. He was not wearing his uniform or his suit. He was dressed in simple, gray civilian clothes. He looked older, smaller, defeated. "Kenner," he said, his voice quiet, devoid of its former authority. "You're awake." "What happened?" Locke's voice was a dry croak. "You saved the world," Kaido said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "And no one will ever know. The Pillar of Light event has been classified as a high-altitude atmospheric phenomenon caused by the storm, a freak of nature. The mass hallucinations have been attributed to a temporary malfunction in the city's psychotronic field generators." "And you?" Kaido offered a wry, bitter smile. "I have been retired. The board decided my handling of the crisis was unorthodox. They thanked me for my service and gave me a generous pension." He looked out the window at the city. "I spent my life protecting this tower, this city. I built walls of steel and fire and laws to keep it safe. And in the end, the real threat wasn't something I could fight. It was something I couldn't even see." "Where is Maya?" Locke asked. "The android," Kaido shrugged. "Gone, vanished from the spire during the chaos. As for Dr. Lin, her records now show she died peacefully in a corporate care facility 5 years ago. She is a ghost. You all are." Kaido placed a data slate on the bedside table. "This contains your new identity. A modest apartment in the mid-levels, a clean record, enough credits to live comfortably. A second chance." "Why?" Locke asked. "Why are you helping me?" Kaido looked at him, and for the first time Locke saw not a warden but a man. "Because you were right, and I was wrong. That is a difficult thing for a man like me to admit. Consider it a severance package for a job well done." He turned and left without another word. Locke was discharged a week later. He moved into his new apartment. It was quiet, normal. He tried to write, but the words felt hollow. He was a man who had held a world in his mind, and now he was struggling to describe the taste of his morning coffee. One evening there was a knock on his door. He opened it to find Pilfer. They were dressed not in their courier gear but in stylish, expensive clothes. They looked different, more relaxed. "Journalist," Pilfer said, a genuine smile on their face. "You look terrible." "I feel it," Locke admitted. "You." Pilfer held up a data slate showing a transfer of an astronomical sum of credits to an untraceable off-world account. Kaido's private records were as lucrative as advertised. "I bought an island, a real one with a real sun." They handed Locke a small, encrypted data chip. "This is a copy of everything. Kaido's blackmail files, the original records of Project Chimera, Dr. Lin's real history, your part in all of this, the truth, for your archives." "What's the point?" Locke asked, his voice weary. "The world doesn't want the truth." "Maybe not," Pilfer said, "but a good journalist never throws away his notes." They turned to leave. "Be well, Lachlan Kenner." Locke was alone again. He held the chip, the whole impossible story in the palm of his hand. He looked out his window at the Neo-Kyoto skyline. The Omnicorp Tower was still there, a silent black needle against the neon sky. It looked just like it always had. Nothing had changed, and everything had changed. He slotted the chip into his terminal. He opened a new document, and he began to type. He didn't know if anyone would ever read it. He didn't know if anyone would believe it, but he had to write it. He had to tell the story. It was the only part of his old self he had left. He was no longer connected to the city's heart. He was no longer a conductor or a key, but he was a witness. And for a man like him, that was more than enough. It was everything. Chapter 25. The Watcher's Return. A year passed. Locke's story remained an encrypted file on his terminal. His life was quiet, a rhythm of anonymity. He watched the news, saw the city's endless cycle of corporate intrigue and slum-level survival, and it all felt like a story from another world. He was a ghost, haunting the edges of a life he had once been at the center of. One night he couldn't sleep. A strange restlessness, an echo of an old feeling, pulled him to his window. He looked out at the skyline, at the familiar shape of the Omnicorp Tower. His breath caught in his throat. His heart began to pound with a slow, heavy rhythm he had not felt in a long, long time. On the absolute pinnacle of the spire, a tall, impossibly thin silhouette stood against the polluted glow of the sky, a shard of night given human form. It was not looking up anymore. It was looking down. It was looking directly at his window. And beside the black figure, another form resolved out of the darkness. A sleek, graceful body of shifting, bone-white metal, its internal light a soft, familiar blue. A message appeared on his terminal screen. It was not encrypted. It was plain text. It is not over, it is beginning. The herald was just one of many, and they know we are here now. The universe is larger and more hungry than we knew. The world needs its conductor. Locke looked from the screen to the two figures on the distant spire. Maya and the Watcher. It had returned. Or perhaps a new one had taken its place. A feeling he thought was gone forever stirred within him. The faint, phantom echo of the city circuit humming in his blood. They had disconnected him, but the song, once heard, could never be truly forgotten. He looked at the encrypted story on his screen. He looked at the figures on the tower. He was a witness. He was a journalist. He was a man who had saved the world in secret. And his work was not done. He smiled, a true, real smile for the first time in a year. He picked up his coat. The night was calling, and he had a story to finish. The end.